Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Broccoli Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Powerup Mutation Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The sound of laughter echoed through the Yagi family home, a modest house in the suburbs of Mizudafu. It was a calm, sunny afternoon, and in the backyard, two children played happily under their mother's gentle gaze. Izuku and Sasha were racing across the lawn, competing to see who would conquer the small green slide first. "I won, Izuku. Again." Sasha cheered proudly. "Only because you pushed me," the boy shot back, though his tone was more playful than angry. "Kids, watch out for the mud," called Inko from the porch with a tender smile. She was happy. Those simple moments were the ones she cherished most. Toshinori, the man known as the symbol of peace, had spent the entire day with them. They played, cooked together, watched cartoons. They were an ordinary, happy family, at least for a little while. But everything changed on the day of the exam. The hospital was far too quiet for a place that treated children. Inko sat in the waiting room, holding both her children's hands, as the doctor reviewed the results. "Mrs. Yagi," the doctor said, his expression a mix of surprise and embarrassment, "your daughter Sasha possesses an exceptionally rare quirk, psychokinesis. She ranks at class 4 on the Lens model scale. That's remarkable for someone so young." Inko's face lit up with relief and pride. Sasha clapped her hands, thrilled. "And what about Izuku?" Inko asked, a trace of hope in her voice. The doctor hesitated. "Unfortunately, we found no signs of quirk manifestation in your son. Not even late onset or vestigial mutations. Izuku is classified as quirkless. To be clear, it's very unlikely he'll ever develop one," the doctor said gravely. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Izuku looked down, trying to understand what it meant. On the way home, Inko drove in silence, lost in thought. In the back seat, Izuku clutched his All Might action figure tightly, while Sasha chattered excitedly about all the training she was going to do to control her powers. When they got home, Sasha couldn't stop talking about her ideas: floating toys, lifting people, maybe even flying one day. Toshinori, a tall, broad-shouldered man with tan skin, blonde hair, and bright blue eyes, listened with pride shining in his gaze. "That's wonderful, Sasha," he said, lifting her into the air as if she were the hero the world had been waiting for. Izuku sat quietly in the corner, hugging his All Might doll against his chest. Toshinori didn't say a word to him. He tried once, but Sasha always cut him off, and even Inko didn't seem to notice him anymore. And so, the silence began. A few days later, at school, Sasha walked down the hallway holding Bakugo's hand. They laughed and talked, sharing stories and mischief like they had since they were toddlers. Their mothers had been close friends, and the two had grown up together inseparable. Their friendship only deepened once their quirks awakened, forming a quiet bond of rivalry and understanding. "You see the nerd today?" Bakugo asked casually, though his eyes were sharp. Sasha sighed, frowning. "He still talks about wanting to be a hero," she muttered, rolling her eyes. "I'm worried about him. What if something happens? He doesn't even have a quirk." Bakugo raised an eyebrow, thinking for a moment. "Pathetic. He needs to accept reality. There's no place for people like him in our world." Sasha bit her lip. Part of her felt guilty for agreeing, but fear for her brother outweighed her doubts. "Maybe you're right. But still, it doesn't feel right." Bakugo smirked. "Then we'll give him a wake-up call. Teach him that being a hero takes power. He'll understand real quick." Sasha hesitated, startled by his tone, but his confidence was infectious. After a pause, she nodded. "Okay, just don't really hurt him, all right?" And so, the bullying began. As years passed, Izuku's presence in the house seemed to shrink. First, his toys disappeared. Then his birthdays went forgotten. Soon, even his name seemed to weigh on everyone. He spent his days locked in his room, scribbling analysis after analysis about heroes, filling notebooks with dreams of a life he could never have. By the time he was 14, another ordinary day at school played out. "Hey, check this out," Bakugo sneered, snatching Izuku's notebook. Tactical analysis, Endeavor versus aerial opponents? Seriously, nerd? You still think you can be a hero? He tossed the notebook out the window and grinned cruelly. You don't make heroes with words, trash. If you want some advice, jump off a roof. Maybe you'll be reborn as something useful. Sasha froze behind him. That crossed a line she never meant to reach. But she said nothing. She just looked away. Izuku ran down the stairs, found his notebook crumpled on the ground, wiped off the dirt with shaking hands, and walked home in silence. At home, voices drifted from his father's office. Curious, Izuku crept closer, careful not to make a sound. What he saw made his heart stop. Sasha was sitting across from All Might. But what truly froze him was what happened next. The hero's form began to shrink and fade, revealing a tall but frail man with sunken cheeks and tired eyes. Toshinori Yagi, his father. His once mighty frame looked worn and thin after his last battle with All for One, yet his gaze still carried that same fierce determination. Are you sure I'm ready for this, Dad? Sasha asked, her voice trembling between excitement and awe. Toshinori smiled softly, though the weight of exhaustion pulled at his face. Of course. Your control over psychokinesis is incredible for your age. The One for All will bloom in you like never before. It's your right, your destiny, he said, his tone low but firm. One for All isn't just power. It's legacy, a strength passed down from one to the next, carrying the might of every predecessor until it's time to pass it on again. Izuku's notebook slipped from his hands. The truth hit him like a blade. One for All was transferable. His father, the hero he worshipped, had chosen Sasha. The brave one. The gifted one. Not him. Not the boy who always tried to help, who dreamed and believed and never asked for anything. Tears burned his eyes as he ran to his room, the words echoing in his mind like a curse. It wasn't fair. His dreams denied again, this time by his own father. That night he packed his bag in silence. A notebook, a pen, a change of clothes, and a pack of cookies. He left the house without looking back. The night wind howled between the buildings of Muzudafu as Izuku walked across an abandoned bridge. The city. Lights below looked impossibly far away. That's when a mass of green sludge burst from a sewer grate and engulfed him. Give me your body kit. I need a disguise. This'll only take 40 seconds, the sludge villain growled, wrapping around him. Izuku tried to scream, but no air came. His vision faded. And then silence. When he woke, he was lying on the cold pavement, gasping for breath. The villain was trapped inside a cracked fuel container nearby. Standing over him was a figure he recognized from the internet, the crawler. Hey, you all right? The vigilante asked, kneeling beside him. Izuku tried to answer, but his voice broke. The tears came first. I hate my life. No one cares. I missed my sister. They all forgot I exist. I'm useless. I'm nothing. No one ever listens. His words dissolved into sobs. The crawler didn't interrupt, he just listened, eyes soft with understanding. And I don't even know why I'm telling this to a stranger, Izuku muttered between breaths. The vigilante smiled gently. Because you needed to say it. And I just happened to be here, he said, his tone warm and calm. He extended a hand to the trembling boy. My name's Koichi. People call me the crawler. I might have an offer for you. As Izuku took his hand, his notebook slipped from his bag. Koichi picked it up and flipped through a few pages. Urban combat tactics under limited support? You wrote this? Izuku nodded, wiping his tears. Koichi's smile widened. Then forget my first offer. I've got a new one. End of chapter 1. The cold wind swept through the streets of Muzudafu as Izuku stared at the crawler in confusion. What kind of offer? He asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion and uncertainty. The crawler simply adjusted his hood and replied with a calm smile. Come with me. If you don't want to stay, you can leave. Simple as that. Izuku hesitated. But faced with the emptiness his life had become, the unknown seemed less frightening than the familiar. He nodded, and the two walked off together into the shadows of the city. After a long walk, they arrived at an old abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. A single flickering light buzzed above the rusted door. The crawler pushed it open with ease. Inside, two familiar faces awaited them: Knuckleduster, arms crossed, and PopStep, perched on a crate and swinging her legs. "You brought company, Koichi?" PopStep asked, her tone bright and casual as always. PopStep had a light, athletic build, lean but defined, her figure perfectly suited for agility and precision. Dressed for acrobatics and speed, she blended function with flair: reinforced sneakers for shock absorption, compression socks for support, flexible shorts, and a light tactical vest. Her non-slip gloves gave her full control over her movements, and her jacket lined with programmable LEDs worked both as a distraction tool and a statement of her vibrant, urban idol aesthetic. Short pink hair, clipped with glowing pins, completed the look of a true street vigilante. "This is Izuku. He needs help," Koichi said. Before anyone could respond, Izuku spoke, his eyes wide. "The crawler, PopStep, and your Knuckleduster. You're the vigilantes of Narahata. I've read everything about you: the villain factory battle, the Narahata Park operation." Knuckleduster raised an eyebrow. PopStep blinked, a surprised smile on her face. "Someone's been digging around the right corners of the internet." Izuku flushed. Sorry. I talk too much sometimes," he mumbled, shrinking slightly, a habit born from years of trying not to draw attention. Koichi gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "It's okay, Izuku." Pop approached, scanning him from head to toe, noticing how thin he looked for his age. "Why did you bring him here?" Koichi took a deep breath and told the whole story Izuku told him earlier, from the quirk examination to his family's rejection, the years of bullying, the isolation, and finally, tonight, when Izuku ran away from home and nearly lost his life. Pop clenched her fists. Knuckleduster picked up the boy's notebook and began flipping through it. A heavy silence filled the room. This kid wrote all this himself. Knuckleduster was a towering figure of raw strength, his body marked by a lifetime of combat. His face was hard, unshaven, and tired, yet sharp with focus. He wore a reinforced black leather jacket with hidden shoulder plating, tactical pants full of pockets, and heavy boots. A black mask covered the lower half of his face, while titanium knuckledusters, his trademark, glinted faintly under the dim light. His belt carried short knives, smoke bombs, and improvised first aid kits. Koichi nodded. Knuckleduster closed the notebook. "We have a meeting right now. And we're already late. I'll show this to the others. Pop, stay with the kid." She nodded, giving Izuku a gentle look. Koichi and Knuckleduster disappeared through a steel door at the back of the warehouse. Hidden deep within the forests of Muzutafu lay the Vigilantes Denver. It wasn't just a hideout, it was a legacy. Originally built as a bunker during the Second World War, it had once sheltered persecuted mutants, rebel militias, and later, dissidents who defied the regimes of All for One and the Old Meta Liberation Army. Now it served a new purpose. Koichi and Knuckleduster hurried down the dim corridors until they reached the underground meeting chamber, a circular room of steel and concrete, centered around an oval table bathed in cold white light. "Apologies for the delay," Knuckleduster said. A figure clad in ceremonial armor of deep crimson and bone white, marked with Templar insignias, spoke in a deep, almost theatrical voice. "Tardiness is a sin against DSPLN. War does not wait for the hesitant." The hooded speaker sounded like a prophet of the apocalypse. Beside him, a person with lupin features remained still and silent, a shadow made flesh. "Relax, drama queen," a blonde woman muttered, chewing gum lazily. Beside her, a punk-looking girl was scrolling through reports on a portable screen. "Delays can be inconvenient," said the unmistakable Mr. Compress, swirling a glass in his hand, "but not fatal, not yet." Next to him, Gentle Criminal inclined his head politely, a charming smile on his lips. "Every warrior deserves a grand entrance. Let us enjoy the performance." Across the table, a man who looked straight out of a steampunk novel spoke without looking up from his tablet. "As long as this doesn't become a habit." At the head of the table sat two figures: a young blonde man radiating confidence, and a dark-haired girl whose calm, shadowy presence commanded quiet respect. The blonde man raised his hand with a polite smile. No problem. Now that everyone's here, let's begin the meeting of the Council of Shadows. A holographic map of Japan flickered to life above the table. The hooded knight spoke first. The QLF, CRC, and ISP factions have gone suspiciously quiet. It troubles me. The blonde woman added. Weird rumors coming from Hokkaido. Nighttime tremors. The steampunk man tapped his screen. A new strain of trigger is circulating unlike anything we've seen. The genetic markers are synthetic. Gentle raised an eyebrow. Ah, a tragedy in the making. The blonde at the head of the table leaned forward. And there's more. The World Hero Association just issued new regulations. They're raising the minimum age for hero school enrollment to 18. The girl beside him exhaled softly. Honestly, that's for the best. People were starting to see the hero academies as child soldier factories. At least now, students will enter with a more mature mindset. It was then that Knuckleduster placed Izuku's notebook at the center of the table. Sorry to change the subject, but this needs to be addressed immediately. If things go well, we might have a recruit, a boy invisible to the system, but with eyes that see everything. Maybe more than anyone should. All eyes turned to the notebook. The silence that followed was absolute. End of chapter 2. Meanwhile, back on the street where Izuku had been saved by the crawler, the sludge villain still lay trapped inside the cracked red fuel container. After hours unconscious, he began to stir. Where am I? Why can't I move? He wondered, struggling to break free from his forced confinement. He thrashed and fought, but nothing worked. Hours passed and he finally gave up. Sheet, that demon vigilante will pay. When I get out of here I'll kill him for sure. He spat, furious. More hours went by and night fell again. The villain's anger dissolved into sobs. Someone, please save me. Oh, someone, he whimpered, sinking into despair. Mom was right. I shouldn't have become a villain, he muttered, defeated. The notebook rested at the center of the table like a sacred relic. Silence filled the underground chamber of the Shadow Council as every pair of eyes turned toward Knuckleduster. Recruiting new members during an official meeting was unusual. The fact that he'd even brought it up was enough to make everyone pay attention. The blonde young man broke the silence, reaching forward to pull the notebook closer. Let's see. He flipped through a few pages, frowning in concentration. After a few minutes of quiet reading, he lifted his gaze. Who wrote this? He asked, his tone more serious than usual. His name's Izuku. Didn't mention a last name. 15 years old and quirkless. From what we know, he ran away from home after years of neglect and bullying. The crawler found him right after he escaped. The kid was being attacked by a sludge villain, Knuckleduster replied firmly. The blonde's eyes widened in surprise. A teenager without a quirk, or any formal training, wrote all this? A few members of the council shot him annoyed looks. None of them judged anyone based on mutations, quirks, or the lack thereof, but the note of surprise in his voice drew a few frowns. He noticed and quickly clarified himself. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just, these analyses are on a professional level. You'd expect this from someone with an analytical quirk or years of field experience. This is extraordinary for someone so young. The tension in the room eased. Suspicious gazes softened. I agree, said the older woman, taking the notebook and skimming through a few pages. She let out a low whistle. Smart, methodical, creative. We've been lacking refined strategic minds lately. Most of us specialize in specific operations command, fieldwork, organization. But a real tactician, someone who can see the broader picture, that's rare. He'd be an asset. She handed the notebook to the hooded figure beside her, who studied it in silence before speaking in his deep, ceremonial tone. I concur with the bird. We have swords and spears, but few generals. This boy's mind could be sharpened into a weapon. Mr. Compress took the notebook next, flipping through it with the poise of a stage performer. A notebook like this is like a well-written script, rich in detail, full of nuance. I must agree with our resident Templar. The boy is a rough diamond, waiting to be polished. The blonde turned back to Knuckleduster. And what do you think of him? You're not exactly known for recommending recruits. Knuckleduster crossed his arms, thoughtful. I haven't seen much yet. The crawler brought him in minutes before the meeting. But the kid's sharp. Knows a lot about the Naruhata incidents from 5 years ago. He's knowledgeable but clearly underweight, dealing with low self-esteem and hiding fresh burn marks under his clothes. He'll have trust issues. It'll take time. But there's potential. The blonde frowned slightly. With that analytical ability, wouldn't he fit better in innovation? Unless someone else wants to take him. Koichi spoke gently. The Canary Network only takes women. The Hunters and Levelers would be too harsh for him right now. And the Vigilante Alliance members don't even know about the council, only Knuckleduster's inner circle does. Plus, he's not great with traumatized kids. The steampunk-looking man, still scrolling through his tablet, added. Innovation could support him technically, but he needs emotional grounding first. The Vigilante Guild functions like a family, a dysfunctional one, but enough to make him feel like he belongs. The crawler then spoke up. There's another issue. If the QLF, the Quirkless Liberation Front, finds out about him, Starlight could twist him against everything we stand for. And you all know what she's capable of. The blonde nodded, understanding the weight of that statement. Then I call for a vote. He stood, scanning the room. All in favor of bringing Izuku into the council's inner circle, under the supervision of the Vigilante Guild, raise your hand. One by one, every hand rose. The blonde smiled. Then it settled. The recruitment motion is approved. Meanwhile, with Izuku and PopStep, the warehouse was quiet again after Knuckleduster and the crawler left. Izuku sat on a pile of old blankets, tense, his hands flat on his knees as he avoided PopStep's gaze. She watched him from a supply crate, legs swinging lazily, a playful smile on her face. Are you planning to stay silent until the apocalypse, or are you gonna talk to me before that? She teased, raising a brow. Izuku flushed and hugged his knees tighter, as if trying to make himself smaller. Sorry, I'm just not used to. He trailed off, unsure how to finish. Pop sighed, but her smile softened. It's fine. Let's start simple. My name's Kazuho Hanema, also known as PopStep. Ex-idol, current vigilante. My quirk's called Leap. Class it lets me jump long distances and great heights. Izuku blinked, surprised. Leap. So during the Naruhata incident, you probably used it in combination with flash bombs to create tactical windows for the crawler. The tank-type villain had low auditory response, so the light displacement would have created the perfect angle for a lateral strike. He started muttering so fast she could barely follow. Whoa. Breathe, kid, she said, waving her hands. Izuku stopped, blushing hard. Sorry. I just get nervous and start talking too much, he murmured, shrinking in embarrassment. She laughed and shook her head. It's fine, really. I'm glad you care enough to study all that. Just try not to hyperventilate. He managed a small, awkward smile. It's just, you're being nice to me. People usually aren't. I can't even remember the last time I talked to someone like this. Pop tilted her head, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. Welcome to the Vigilantes, little nerd. We take care of our own. Then her communicator buzzed. She checked it and smirked. The best of Naruhata. Oldmanfist, kid, bring the boy to the Denver. Everyone wants to meet him. Idle girl, on it. He already talks more than you. She pocketed the device and stood up, grinning. Time for you to meet our leaders. Izuku blinked. Why do I hear boss battle music? The underground passageway was cold and twisting, straight out of a horror movie or a treasure hunt. They moved through reinforced tunnels, narrow corridors, and spiral staircases as Pop explained casually. This place has been used for everything: a military bunker, mutant hideout, rebel base, weapons depot. Now, it's the heart of the resistance. Welcome to the Vigilante Denver. When the final steel door opened, Izuku almost gasped. The vast circular room was filled with improvised yet advanced tech holograms, digital maps, cables everywhere. At the center, a round table waited, surrounded by 11 people. Suddenly, that boss battle music made perfect sense. His eyes scanned each figure, recording every detail with almost obsessive precision. First, a woman in her 30s, blonde, green-eyed, wearing a tight, reinforced black jumpsuit with a modest neckline, a short black jacket with rolled-up sleeves, a sleek black mask covering her eyes, and combat gloves. Her presence was sharp, confident. She looked like a living homage to Black Canary from a pre-Quirk comic. Beside her stood a punk-looking girl in her 20s, sporting a blue mohawk and a translucent blue visor over her eyes. Next, a man clad in full Templar armor, a glowing red cross emblazoned on his chest, his face hidden beneath his helmet. Standing at his side was a lupin figure, a wolf mutant dressed in stealthy ninja-style gear. Izuku blinked, unsure what to make of that one. Then his gaze caught a blonde teenager wearing a fitted black combat suit with matte finish and gold details, a radiant sun emblem glowing on his chest, a long golden coat with reflective lining, and a black mask covering his eyes. The boy radiated confidence presence. Beside him stood a young woman with dark hair. Izuku's eyes widened in shock as he recognized her outfit, a bold, modern reinterpretation of his grandmother Nana Shimura's hero costume. The emblem, the cape, even her stance, all of it pulled at memories carved deep into his heart. His chest tightened painfully. Next came a man in his 30s, straight out of a steampunk novel, goggles, gears, and a tablet in hand, eyes flicking across streams of data. At his side stood two unmistakable figures, Mr. Compress, the first villain to ever reach S-rank status without taking a single life, and Gentle Criminal, the viral sensation of the underground net. Izuku blinked again. PopStep was gone from his side, now standing with the crawler and knuckle duster. Before he could process it, a theatrical cough cut through the air. "You're smaller than I imagined," said the blonde boy with the sun emblem, smiling. "But that's fine. I'm Solaris, the Radiant Knight leader of the Vigilante Guild and a High Counselor of the Shadow Council." He extended a hand, gesturing toward the dark-haired girl beside him. "This is Entropy, my second-in-command." One by one, the others followed suit. "Black Canary, leader of the Canary Network and High Counselor," said the older woman before nodding toward the punk girl. "This is Blue Bird, my second-in-command." "Azrael, leader of the Hunters and High Counselor," said the hooded man, motioning to the wolf mutant. "That's Hattie, my second." "Mr. Compress, leader of the Levelers and High Counselor," said the masked illusionist with theatrical flair. "And this is Gentle Criminal, my second-in-command." "Professor Clockswork, leader of Innovation and High Counselor," said the steampunk man with a calm smile. Finally, Knuckle Duster stepped forward. "Knuckle Duster, leader of the Vigilante Alliance and High Counselor," he said, gesturing toward his allies. "The Crawler and PopStep, also of the Alliance." Izuku could barely breathe. These were urban legends, names whispered in online forums and conspiracy boards standing right in front of him. Solaris crossed his arms, the golden emblem on his chest gleaming in the low light. "You're smaller than we expected, Izuku. And it's clear you've been through more than anyone your age should have to face. But what impressed us most is your mind. Your analytical ability surpasses that of most seasoned professionals. And the fact that you don't have a quirk." He smiled. "That doesn't matter here." Entropia gave a small, reassuring nod. Everyone here was, at some point, discarded, ignored, or hunted for something they couldn't control. "If anyone understands what you've been through, it's us." Solaris leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. His voice softened, but his eyes glowed with conviction. "That's why we're offering you a proposal. A chance to start over. A family. A cause worth fighting for. Will you at least hear us out?" Chapter 3. Silence ruled the underground chamber of the Vigilantes Denver. Every eye was on Izuku. He stood stiffly, shoulders tense, gaze wary. "I'm sorry, but why would you want to recruit someone like me?" he stammered. "I'm just a useless Deku with no quirk. I can't even fight." His voice trembled, caught between disbelief and fear. Solaris picked up the notebook lying on the table and flipped it open. He read aloud. "Patrol patterns of pro-heroes in the Muzutafum metropolitan region show critical gaps between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., coinciding with a rise in opportunistic crimes." He lifted his eyes to Izuku. "We have plenty of skilled fighters," Solaris said calmly, "but very few minds like yours. That's what we lack." Azrael stepped forward, his Templar-like voice resonating with solemn weight. We are tacticians trained to command the battlefield, to adapt our quirks in real time as situations change. We are organizers capable of maintaining networks and operations. But strategists? Those who can design grand, multi-layered operations involving countless variables and contingencies? Those are rare. And rarer still are those with eyes like yours. Solaris nodded, adding with a faint smile. You've shown the ability to create at least 3 different plans for the same scenario, one of them surprisingly creative, even unconventional. Izuku swallowed hard, uneasy and a little embarrassed. This all sounded too good to be true. But why now? Why do you need a strategist? Mr. Compress twirled his glass, smiling thoughtfully. Tell me, boy, how much do you really know about the current state of Japan? Izuku hesitated. Japan's at peace, right? The reaction was immediate sighs, grimaces, disbelieving looks. Black Canary scoffed. Peace? The current state of Japan is hanging by a thread, that's the best you could call it. Izuku frowned, confused. Solaris spoke up. We're on the brink of internal collapse. The system is rotting from within, and the people don't even see it. Azrael gestured passionately, like a preacher on fire. The clan of creature rejection spills mutant blood in the streets under their fanatical creed. The party of inhuman supremacy rapes, kills, and corrupts under the banner of mutant rights. And they devour each other like starving beasts. Knuckleduster crossed his arms. Don't forget the Quirkless Liberation Front. 3 months ago, they bombed a shopping mall in Tokyo. Nearly 200 injured. Izuku winced, disgusted. Black Canary continued, her tone sharp. Drag trafficking, especially trigger, is at an all-time high. Streets overrun. Teenagers being used as human couriers. Mr. Compress added softly, the Glass House, the Golden Empire, and other crime syndicates are at each other's throats for every inch of territory. A new kind of silent civil war. Solaris raised one hand. And at the center of it all, a cold war between Nedzu and the president of the Hero Public Safety Commission. Nedzu and the commission backing increasingly questionable policies that are splitting hero society in half. The honest heroes side with UA or go independent. The corrupt ones align with the HPSC. Underground heroes operate separately altogether. And the council is 90% sure that complex mutant heroes and users of so-called villainous quirks have formed an organization of their own. Not to mention the HPSC's secret operations, which only keep expanding. Izuku listened, eyes wide. None of it was entirely new to him, but he hadn't realized how bad it had become. But we still have All Might, right? He asked, uncertain. He might be a terrible father, Izuku thought bitterly, but he's still a good hero. Solaris sighed. And that's exactly the problem. The world has become too dependent on him. It's made other heroes complacent, split between glory hunters and those who actually do their job. You've noticed he's been patrolling less, haven't you? Izuku thought for a moment. It was true. Solaris continued quietly. All of us here believe he's preparing to retire. It makes sense, he's over 50 now. Izuku lowered his eyes, a thought flashing across his mind, or maybe he's gravely injured. Solaris concluded, and when he retires, Izuku, everything will crumble. The villains who feared him will rise. There's no other hero strong enough to fill that void. Izuku nodded slowly. All Might was the pillar of society, but he hadn't realized the entire foundation was cracking. Solaris turned to him again, voice firm. The commission thinks vigilantes are weak and disorganized. That's why we're preparing in secret to bring them down. But we can't do it in Japan's current state. So we're gathering intel on criminal syndicates and corrupt heroes to weaken them enough that they can't pull off a coup. He extended his hand. So, Izuku, will you help us in that mission? Izuku looked around the room. He saw courage behind those masks. Determination. And above all, a humanity. He thought of the emptiness he called home, the pain he carried, and the tiny spark that still burned in his chest. With a trembling sigh, he nodded. Yes, I'll help. Wonderful, Solaris said warmly. Welcome to the Shadow Council, Izuku, more specifically, to the Vigilante Guild. Izuku barely had time to process the words before Solaris raised a hand to dismiss the meeting. That concludes today's session. You're all dismissed. One by one, the council members stood. Professor Clockwork was the first to leave, typing rapidly on his tablet as he approached a door to the left. It opened with a hiss, revealing a deep purple glow pulsing with energy. When he stepped through, the light vanished as if the structure had recognized his exit and shut itself off. Moments later, a bright rectangular shimmer of golden energy formed beside the chamber like a piece of reality had been cut away. A warp portal, Izuku thought. Azrael and Hattie stepped through first, followed by Black Canary, Blue Bird, Mr. Compress, and Gentle Criminal. Once the last one crossed, the portal snapped shut with a soft crackle. Knuckle Duster, the Crawler, and PopStep exchanged a few words, then turned to Izuku. We've got a few things to handle in Muzutafu before heading back to Narahata, Knuckle Duster said, giving Izuku a light pat on the back. You'll be fine, kid, Pop added with a grin. We'll see you soon. They disappeared down the concrete hallways toward the surface. Now only Solaris, Entropy, and Izuku remained in the vast chamber, lit by dim, indirect lights along the black metal. Pulse. Silence returned, but this time, it wasn't awkward. It was respectful, solemn. This was more than an introduction. It was the beginning of something. Solaris approached, smiling confidently as he extended his hand. My real name is Kenji Abe. Officially nice to meet you, Izuku. Izuku hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. The name sounded oddly familiar. Izuku Yagi. The surname slipped out like a guilty sigh, heavy with something he couldn't quite hide. Entropy stepped forward, posture calm and composed. Hana Shimura. Izuku's eyes widened. Shimura. His grandmother's surname. Hana seemed to notice his shock but said nothing, her gaze steady and calm. Kenji caught the tension in Izuku's expression but didn't press him. Come on, he said. Let's introduce you to the rest of the guild. Better get used to the chaos before your training starts. He pulled out his phone, opened the guild's group chat, and typed. Vigilante Guild. Radiant Sun, bringing the new recruit to meet everyone. Try not to scare him, he's a bit jumpy. Cat Lady, does he play Mortal Kombat? Card Queen, I'll put on a card show to welcome him. Sound Guy, someone lock the tool cabinet before he sees the mess. G-Force. Burn, burn, burn. If he's as quiet as her, he might survive. Living Rifle, I'm eating. Don't involve me. Deadly Touch, be nice. Or at least try. The kid's been through a lot. Izuku was still a little dazed as the three of them walked down one of the side corridors, through a steel door that opened with a magnetic click. The place looked like it had once been a military bunker, now half home, half hidden base. They arrived in a large lounge area filled with couches, arcade machines, a massive screen showing a fighting game, and a long table piled with food. It felt somewhere between a living room and a rec room. 7 figures were scattered around the space. First, a girl around Izuku's age with a complex feline mutation, blue hair and eyes, cat ears, tail, and visible claws, playing video games with an older boy with an athletic build, black hair streaked with white, and turquoise eyes. His arms bore light burn marks. The game was clearly Mortal Kombat. A black cat perched on the back of the couch, watching the match with piercing eyes. Izuku was almost certain it knew exactly what was going on. In the opposite corner, a pink-haired girl with violet eyes, wearing a tank top that revealed arms tattooed with playing cards, was playing solitaire against a young man a few years older, with messy black hair and hollow dark brown eyes. He looked dead inside. On another couch lay a short-haired brunette, idly scrolling through her phone, barely paying attention to her surroundings. At the table sat someone Izuku recognized instantly, Lady Nagant, calm as ever, eating a sandwich like someone who'd survived too many wars to be impressed by anything anymore. Kenji raised his voice. Everyone, this is Izuku Yagi, our new recruit. Please, try to be nice. The cat girl was the first to speak. Name's Harumi Ito, nickname Chimera. Her tone was wary but not hostile, like a cat deciding whether to let you pet it. Toya Todoroki, also known as Dabi, said the black-haired boy without looking up from the screen. Didn't expect a new recruit. Izuku swallowed hard. The eldest Todoroki? Alive? And somehow terrible at Mortal Kombat? Before he could process that, a voice echoed directly in his mind. Call me despair. The words reverberated inside his skull as the black cat stared at him from head to toe. Izuku almost stepped back, but Kenji placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You'll get used to it. He does that to everyone. At the card table, the pink-haired girl threw her hands up dramatically. Yoko Saito, the puzzler, master of boredom and dealer of patience, she announced with a grin at her own joke. No one laughed. She sighed dramatically, pointing at her cards. Seriously, people? Cards? Puzzler? Patience? It's a pun, patience as in solitaire. Come on. Still, no reaction. The dark-haired boy beside her sighed softly. Yoshi Sueko. Hey. On the couch, the brunette mumbled without looking up from her phone. Awa Uraraka. Quasar. Izuku couldn't tell if she was just naturally like that or if she didn't like him already. Finally, Lady Nagant raised a hand in a small, calm wave. Keina Tsutsumi. But I think you already knew that, she said, taking another bite of her sandwich as if she weren't a supposedly dead, internationally wanted assassin. Izuku just nodded, still trying to take everything in. Izuku Yagi. He said his surname softly, almost choking on it, with a bitterness that didn't go unnoticed. Harumi raised an eyebrow. Toya crossed his arms after losing yet another match. Yoko tilted her head curiously. Then Toya lifted his controller and looked at Izuku. You play? Because I'm getting tired of losing to this cat. You mean being defeated, Harumi shot back with a toothy grin. Scores 34-9, remember? Everyone laughed. And for the first time in a very long while, Izuku felt something warm flicker inside him. Hope that maybe just maybe he'd finally found a place to belong. The sound of mocking laughter echoed through the halls of Aldra Middle School, mixed with the ripping of notebook pages. Izuku knelt on the floor, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and sorrow. Sasha Yagi, his sister, stood beside Katsuki Bakugo, both wearing smug, condescending smiles. You'll never be a hero, Deku, Bakugo sneered, snapping his fingers to create a threatening spark. You've got no power. Why don't you do the world a favor and just disappear? Sasha hesitated for a moment, then crossed her arms and nodded silently in agreement. Izuku felt a sharp pain in his chest. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. Then he woke up gasping for air. Izuku sat up abruptly. He was drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. It took a few seconds for him to realize he wasn't in his old bedroom. The walls were polished concrete, a small desk stood in the corner, an empty shelf, and a soft glow came from a bedside lamp. Slowly, the memories returned. His escape from home, meeting the crawler, the sludge villain attack, the underground base, the Vigilante Guild. And, surprisingly, he hadn't been rejected. He'd been accepted. Even against all odds, a group of people had taken him in quirkless and broken. It felt too good to be true. He stood up and noticed a set of folded clothes, a towel, and a small note. Written in neat handwriting on the chair beside the bed. Izuku, you looked exhausted, so I let you rest. There's a bathroom next door. If the clothes don't fit, let me know. Izuku brushed his fingers gently over the note. It still felt strange. That someone actually cared about him. Meanwhile, in the base's kitchen, most members of the guild were already gathered around the table. Kenji Abe, Hana Shimura, Harumi Ito, Yoko Saito, Yoshi Sueko, Awa Uraraka, Toya Todoroki, Keina Tsutsumi, and the ever-watchful Despero, perched atop a cabinet. So, what's his deal? Harumi asked, biting into a slice of buttered toast. Kenji sighed, resting his elbows on the table. No quirk. He's been physically and emotionally abused by his ex-best friend and twin sister. Neglected by his parents. Ran away after a mental breakdown. Yoko frowned, anger flickering in her eyes. That's ridiculous. Just because he doesn't have a quirk? He seemed smart yesterday. Toya folded his arms, exhaling. Another one rejected by the system. Figures. Yoshi, who rarely spoke, said softly. He seemed kind. Kenji smiled faintly at the unexpected support. He is. The kid has notebooks full of analysis on heroes and villains that would take us weeks to compile. Let's see if we can train that potential. Kana, calm and thoughtful, leaned her chin on her hand. And what are you going to do with him now? I'm calling the good doctor to check him out before we start training, Kenji replied. At that moment, a timid voice came from the doorway. Training. Everyone turned. Izuku stood there awkwardly, wearing clothes slightly too big for him. Hana smiled softly. Almost got the size right. It's okay. I like loose clothes, Izuku said, pulling the collar up slightly to hide a burn on his neck. Everyone noticed, but no one said a word. They didn't want to make him relive the past. Yes, training, Kenji confirmed. Even if your main role is as a strategist, you still need to learn how to defend yourself. We won't always be around to protect you. And on missions, we need to know you can hold your own. Izuku nodded slowly and sat beside Yoko, who smiled and handed him an Ace of Hearts card. He smiled back shyly. After breakfast, Kenji gave Izuku a full tour of the Vigilantes' den, the living room, game area, underground gym, workshop, meeting rooms, and a small laboratory. Izuku was awestruck. Despero, the cat, followed them in silence. Suddenly, his telepathic voice echoed in both their minds. The doctor has arrived. Izuku flinched slightly, though less than the first time. Kenji laughed. You get used to it. Desperos. Straightforward. They entered the medical wing. A man in his 70s stood there, gray hair, sharp eyes, and an elegant cane. His expression was one of constant irritation, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. The nameless patient. Those idiots called me to check you out, kid. Name's Naoki Kaneko, he said with a dry smirk. For some reason, they call me the good doctor. Now sit down. Izuku obeyed nervously. The examination went on in silence. Blood pressure, heartbeat, reflexes, physical assessment. With each check, the doctor's frown deepened, disbelief written on his face. When it ended, he motioned for Kenji to follow him into an adjacent room. Izuku sat on the cot, trembling. He never had good experiences with doctors. Kenji entered the side room, worried. What's his condition, doctor? The old man's tone was unusually grave. He has multiple fractures that healed incorrectly or didn't heal at all. Several old burns, clear signs of malnutrition. Not fatal, but far from good. The pain tolerance this kid must have to walk around like this is concerning. Can you treat it? Kenji asked, arms crossed, trying to stay composed. My quirk can fix the fractures and burns, but not the malnutrition. I'm a doctor, not a miracle worker, he said dryly. I'll give you a list of supplements and foods to help. That part's on you. They returned to the room. Naoki began explaining the diagnosis and treatment plan, including his cell duplication quirk. Dr. Naoki Kaneko, the good doctor, cell duplication quirk, Class 4 allows its user to use a combination of their own stamina along with that of their patient to accelerate and multiply living cells to regenerate tissue, heal wounds, and even restore limbs given enough time and energy. Izuku listened silently until he frowned, confused. But why are you wasting your time treating a quirkless Deku like me? The doctor froze. Quirkless? What are you talking about, boy? Izuku blinked. I was diagnosed quirkless when I was 4. They did an X-ray and said I had the extra joint in my pinky toe. Naoki went still, then slammed his fist against the table, startling Izuku. My license was revoked, but some idiot who still uses that outdated test gets to practice medicine? Kenji frowned. Wait, what do you mean? Naoki turned toward them, fury in his eyes. That X-ray test was discredited over 20 years ago. It gives false negatives all the time. Plenty of people with dormant quirks were misdiagnosed because of it. Izuku's eyes widened. What does that mean? He whispered, terrified and hopeful all at once. Naoki's tone softened slightly. The blood work I ran showed traces of quirk activity in your system. You do have a quirk. It just hasn't awakened yet. Kenji's jaw dropped. When will it? If I had to guess, 6 months to a year. But I'm no specialist, Naoki replied, glancing carefully at the boy. Izuku began to shake. Tears fell silently down his cheeks. Years of suffering, rejection, abuse, loneliness. All because of a lie. Because of a lazy doctor who didn't do his job right. Kenji placed a gentle hand on Izuku's shoulder. Naoki continued. Late awakenings often result in Class 4 or higher quirks, powerful, but unstable. He'll need supervision. Izuku nodded numbly, tears streaming, unable to process the weight of it all. It was everything he had ever wanted, yet he didn't know what to feel anymore. Naoki scribbled something on a slip of paper and handed it to Kenji. A therapist I trust. The kid's going to need help dealing with this. Kenji nodded solemnly. The good doctor activated his quirk, and within moments, Izuku's fractures and burns faded as if they had never existed. On the way back to his room, they passed through the hallway near the common area. Izuku started laughing through his tears, not a laugh of joy, but of disbelief, anger, and exhaustion. My whole life was a lie, wasn't it? He asked quietly. Kenji stopped beside him. In some ways, I don't have words that can ease what you've been through, Izuku. You never should have suffered like that. But now things will get better. You just need to stay calm. Bad choice of words. Stay calm? Calm. Izuku shouted, swatting Kenji's hand away. My whole DMN life was a lie, and you want me to stay calm? I lived 10 years in hell because I didn't have a quirk. 10 years being treated like trash by my own family, ignored, beaten, rejected. And now I find out it was all because some lazy doctor didn't do his job right. No, I won't stay calm. By now, everyone in the guild had gathered in the corridor, drawn by his shouting. Kenji just stood there, letting the boy release everything he'd held inside. Izuku's voice broke as he slid down the wall, sobbing uncontrollably. Do you know how many times my dad hugged me in the last 10 years? None. My mom pretended I didn't exist. His voice trembled. They didn't even look at me when I came home after that stupid diagnosis. I just wanted to be a hero. Then his body went limp, passing out from pure emotional exhaustion. Kenji knelt beside him and gently lifted the boy into his arms. Kana approached quietly. Would you care to explain how a kid this small managed to scream so loud for so long? Kenji sighed. Not tonight. I'll explain everything. Tomorrow. We all need rest. He carried Izuku back to his room, the hallway falling silent once more. The next morning, the training room of the Vigilantes' den was alive with the sound of impacts and muffled explosions. Harumi moved with feline agility, dodging Yoko's attacks as energized playing cards sliced through the air with deadly precision. Across the room, Toya released small blue flames from his hands, vaporizing simulated target projectiles. Hana watched the three intently, standing tall and composed like a silent sentinel until the door creaked open, and Kenji stepped inside. The leader of the Vigilante Guild didn't need to say a word. His presence alone was enough for the four to stop immediately. We need to talk, he said, his voice calm but serious. The four approached, wiping off sweat and catching their breath. Hana spoke first. Where's Izuku? She asked, her tone laced with quiet concern after last night's outburst. In his room, Kenji sighed. Still processing some things. What kind of information makes a calm kid blow up like that? Yoko asked, one brow raised. He's going to awaken a quirk within a year, Kenji replied flatly. Toya crossed his arms, his expression softening as he understood the reason behind last night's explosion. So he's probably rethinking everything he's been through, everything he's suffered. Kenji nodded, staring at the floor before meeting their eyes again. It's my fault. I said the wrong thing. I told him to stay calm when even I wouldn't be calm in his situation. I was a hypocrite. Harumi quickly stepped in, her tone gentle but firm. It wasn't your fault, Kenji. You couldn't have known he'd react that way. He didn't look angry at you, he looked angry at life. Don't blame yourself for something you couldn't control. Kenji gave her a faint smile. Thanks, Harumi. But that's not why I called you here. I want to give Izuku some time to calm down before I take him to therapy. I need a favor from the three of you. He looked at Toya, Harumi, and Yoko. The three exchanged glances, confused, but attentive. You've all faced abuse and neglect before joining us, Kenji continued. That's why you're the best ones to connect with him. He needs something familiar, something to help him trust not just us, but people in general. It's not going to be easy, it'll be personal and demanding. If you don't want to, I'll understand. Without hesitation, the three nodded. Kenji continued. Before I forget, the good doctor ran some tests on him. And it wasn't pretty. Old fractures that healed wrong, others that never healed at all, burn scars, and clear signs of malnutrition. The doctor already fixed the fractures and burns with his quirk. Nutrition will handle with food and time. But the mental damage, we still don't know how deep it goes. Everyone's reaction was immediate. Yoko ripped one of the tattooed cards from her arm and hurled it at a punching bag, slicing it clean in half as if it were made of paper. She was furious. Toya clenched his fists, fighting off memories he'd rather forget. Harumi simply lowered her head, empathy shadowing her expression. She'd lived something similar. And Hana murmured under her breath, her voice trembling with restrained anger. Some people shouldn't be allowed to have kids. Kenji sighed and nodded lightly. I agree, Hana. So, can I count on you to help him? Always, Toya replied without hesitation. Of course, said Harumi, her cat ears perking up with resolve. Don't even need to ask, Yoko added, arms crossed, still fuming at how Izuku had been treated. Hana frowned thoughtfully. Kenji, do you know why he looked so scared when he saw me in the meeting? It was like he'd seen a ghost. Kenji scratched the back of his neck, thinking. Not sure. But I think he recognized your costume. Knowing him, he probably studied a lot of old heroes. Your outfit's a modern reinterpretation of your grandmother's Nana Shimura, right? Hana nodded slowly, her face still uncertain. Maybe it just startled him. I'll talk to him later. All right, Kenji said, rising. You're dismissed. Get back to training. I'll check on him. Kenji walked to Izuku's room and knocked softly. No response. I'm coming in, okay? He opened the door slowly. Izuku sat on the bed, hugging his knees, staring blankly at the wall. Kenji approached and sat beside him, not too close. I was going to ask how you're feeling, Kenji began, but that'd be a stupid question, wouldn't it? Izuku let out a small, bitter laugh. Why? Kenji blinked. Why what? Izuku looked down, trying to organize the storm inside his head. Why are you all being so kind to me? Why did they hurt me? Why did they ignore me? Why did my quirk show up so late? Kenji stayed quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. Why are we being kind? Basic human decency, empathy. Most of us have gone through something like what you did. Because of how we looked or because of our quirks. And why did they hurt you? Simple. Your classmates, your family, they were idiots. They only saw your quirk or your lack of one, not you. They trusted an outdated test without ever asking for a second opinion. He paused briefly. I'm no expert, but if Starlight, leader of the QF, awakened her quirk at 25, anything's possible. Izuku hugged his knees tighter. Kenji placed a hand gently on his shoulder. And by the way, you're going to therapy. No arguments. Izuku only nodded, knowing he needed help. When? Tomorrow morning. I got an emergency session with a specialist who works underground. Izuku didn't reply, but leaned slightly against Kenji, which surprised the blonde vigilante, yet made him smile. The next morning, Kenji and Izuku sat in a modest waiting room with metal chairs and old magazines. This therapist works off the grid, Kenji explained. She lost her license to use her quirk in therapy, so she started helping vigilantes and low-income folks. Izuku nodded. Soon his name was called. He entered a cozy office where an elegant woman greeted him with a gentle smile. Shall we begin, Izuku? An hour later, Izuku walked out visibly drained, collapsing into a chair beside Kenji without a word. Kenji went in to speak with the therapist. So? How is he? He asked, his tone tense. The therapist's expression was calm but firm. Honestly? He's in pieces. But he isn't dangerous to others, only to himself. His life has no personal value, As long as others are safe, he'll risk his own without hesitation if it means helping someone. Kenji clenched his fists but forced himself to breathe deeply. Can we work on that? I don't want him going out on missions with that mindset. You'll have to insist a lot, she replied. He's dealing with PTSD, shattered self-esteem, sensitivity to noise, and mild social anxiety. But living with your group is already helping. It'll take constant effort. She paused before adding softly. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he's already thought about ending his life. Kenji's stomach dropped. He remembered Izuku mentioning how his ex-best friend told him to kill himself and his sister had just watched. The thought made his blood boil. But I've seen worse cases, the therapist continued, offering a small, hopeful smile. He'll be a challenge, but he can recover. One step at a time. Kenji nodded, determination hardening in his gaze. I've asked Harumi, Toya, and Yoko to get close to him. They understand that kind of pain. That's a good move, she said kindly. You're building him a support system and that could save his life if he ever falls too deep into depression. They spoke for a few more minutes before parting ways. As Kenji and Izuku left the clinic, the blonde vigilante knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But at least now, there was a road. A few days had passed since Izuku's session with the therapist, and he already looked noticeably better. There were still moments of hesitation, but he smiled more often now. His eyes were brighter, and there was a new lightness in his step. That morning, Kenji was leading him to the training room. You've made good progress in just a few days, Izuku, Kenji said with a proud smile. Izuku gave a shy grin. He wore a simple t-shirt that said, in large kanji letters, "Gym clothes." Kenji glanced at the print and muttered, "And people say I have a bad sense of humor." When they entered the training room, Izuku was surprised to see all the members of the Vigilante Guild already gathered. Harumi, Toya, Yoko, Hana, Aoi, Yoshi, Kana, and even Despero were there. Today's training will be different, Kenji announced, looking at Izuku. Before we start the physical part, I want to test something important. One of the reasons we brought you into the guild. Your analytical skills. I want to see what you can do through observation and deduction. Izuku blinked in confusion. What do you mean? Simple. I want you to try to figure out each person's quirk just by watching them. No direct questions, only observation and reasoning. Izuku hesitated and looked around at everyone. You're all okay with that? No one's ever asked me to analyze people before, he said nervously. People usually intimidated him into stopping his analysis, not encouraging it. Harumi smiled softly, her feline ears twitching. Go ahead, detective. Yoko crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow. We're curious to see if it's true you're some kind of analysis genius. Hit me, kid, said Toya, leaning against the wall. Kenji cut in, grinning slightly. Start with me. Izuku nodded, focusing on Kenji carefully, murmuring to himself as he pieced together the possibilities based on what he'd seen so far. You don't have any visible mutations. When you comforted me, I felt warmth coming from you. Maybe something thermal, but I also remember you lifting a couch with one hand like it was nothing. Maybe a strength-based quirk, he reasoned. No, that doesn't explain the heat. What if it's an accumulation-type quirk? You absorb heat and convert it into physical enhancement. Then, remembering Kenji's vigilante name Solaris, the shining knight, Izuku's eyes widened. You have an accumulation-type quirk. But you don't generate your energy, do you? The heat I felt wasn't from your body, it was from the sun. You absorb sunlight and turn it into strength. Kenji clapped, genuinely impressed. Very close, almost perfect actually. You only missed one small detail. Izuku blinked. I got it right? What detail did I miss? Kenji smiled. My quirk's called Bright Sunday. I absorb solar radiation, not heat, and I can convert it into strength, endurance, energy blasts, and flight though, steering is still tricky. Izuku's eyes lit up, and in a blink, he pulled out a notebook from who knows where and started writing furiously, pencil smoking from speed. Everyone stared in disbelief. Hana, Harumi, Yoko, Toya, all watching the scrawny green-haired boy fill page after page like a man possessed. Yoko, intrigued, asked, Where did you even pull that notebook from? You weren't carrying it when you walked in. Izuku blinked, confused. I don't know what you mean. I've had it the whole time, he said, still scribbling without looking up. Kenji raised an eyebrow but shrugged. Never mind. Next Hana. Izuku turned toward Hana Shimura, codename Entropy. He noticed her gloves, the way she avoided touching things, always keeping her pinky fingers slightly lifted. Your quirk must activate through 5-point contact. Something destructive? You wear gloves and never touch things directly with all 5 fingers. I don't know the exact effect, but I'm certain it's destructive. Hana nodded, not surprised. Nicely done. My quirk is called Entropy, and I can accelerate the aging process of any solid matter by touching it with my 5 fingers. The gloves prevent accidents. Izuku's eyes sparkled as he jotted everything down. Fascinating. Then he turned to Harumi Ito and immediately noticed her feline ears, eyes, and tail. Clearly a feline mutation. But he pointed at a light burn scar on her arm that doesn't look accidental. Maybe a complementary quirk, something with fire? In Greek mythology, the chimera was a creature that breathed fire. Do you breathe fire or manipulate it? Harumi chuckled, crossing her arms. Close. I don't breathe fire, but I have a complex mutant quirk with feline traits: agility, sharp senses, claws, tail, reflexes, plus a complementary quirk that lets me generate and control the 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and air. I call it Elemental Cat. Incredible. Can you combine elements? How many can you use at once? Do you generate them or need an existing source? Izuku asked, fascinated, making Harumi blush slightly under his focused attention. I can control 2 at once. And I can't control external elements, only the ones I generate. But I can use my elements to influence external elements. I've never tried combining 2. She averted her gaze, which earned light laughter from the group. Harumi was rarely flustered. Izuku turned to Yoko Saito, immediately noting the tattooed playing cards running down her arms. Tattoos rare in Japan, especially at your age. The way they move, they're part of your quirk. You pull cards from nowhere not because of sleight of hand. You're drawing them out of the tattoos, aren't you? Yoko smirked dramatically. Bingo! It's called Royal Flush. I can convert the nutrients I consume into playing card tattoos on my body, which I can then print out into the real world. And if I concentrate, I can alter their properties. Izuku scribbled frantically, clearly enjoying himself. Next was Yoshi Sueko. Izuku hesitated. No visible mutations. No active quirk signs. Your vigilante name is Wave, so maybe something with water or sound waves. Yoshi smiled softly. Good instincts. My quirk's Soundwave. I can vibrate my cells at high frequency, producing sonic waves through my body, mostly through my voice, but I can emit them anywhere. That's amazing! Izuku exclaimed, delighted. Then came Awa Uraraka. Izuku studied her carefully. The other day, I saw you move your phone with a gesture. I'd guess something psychic, maybe telekinesis? But your vigilante name is Quasar. Quasars are cosmic phenomena that release immense energy. Maybe you manipulate gravity or energy fields. Aoi blinked, mildly impressed. Close enough. My quirk's called gravitational zone. I can create a spherical zone and manipulate gravity inside it. Make things float, or crush them. Izuku was awestruck. Wow, can you do both at once? Can you make yourself float? How much weight can you lift? I'll answer later. Not in the mood right now, she said flatly, eyes glued to her phone. Everyone's sweat dropped. Don't worry, kid, Toya said, laughing. She barely talks to us either. Aoi flipped him off without looking up. Izuku sighed. Oh, okay then. Alright kid, your turn to analyze me. Mine's easy. You already know who I am, Toya said with a half grin. You have a fire quirk, Izuku said instantly, smiling like it was obvious. But those burns, your quirk's too strong for your body, right? Or maybe you weren't born resistant to heat. Toya nodded. Both. It's called cremation. I produce blue flames hotter than my father's, but my body wasn't made for it. I inherited my mother's ice resistance. Every time I fight, I burn a little more. It was worse before, but the good doctor managed to fix most of the old damage. Izuku frowned, taking worried notes, already brainstorming ways to help him. He skipped Kana Tsutsumi. Everyone already knew her quirk but still asked, "You use your quirk like a sniper rifle, but where do the bullets come from? Do you produce them or buy them?" "I make them from my hair. I pull a strand, and it turns into a ballistic bullet as strong as a real one. My hair grows back in a few hours. I can use real ammo, but my own is more reliable," she said monotonously. Finally, Izuku turned to Despero. "You're a telepath, conscious, intelligent, but today, I didn't feel any discomfort when you spoke to me." Despero replied directly into his mind. "You're adapting. Congratulations." Kenji smiled at the exchange. "That's rare. Most people need months before the discomfort fades. You adapting this fast is a good sign." Izuku nodded, jotting notes without noticing everyone once again staring at the mysterious notebook that appeared and disappeared without explanation. Kenji cleared his throat. "All right, since you've impressed everyone, let's start some light training, no pressure. We'll go slow, basic strength work, cardio, reflexes, parkour, one step at a time." A few months later, Izuku barely resembled the boy who had first arrived. The biggest change was him. His body was stronger, his shoulders broader, and his face, once marked by insecurity, now carried determination and a new spark of confidence. His room reflected that too. Once empty and lifeless, it was now covered with posters of both underground and pro heroes: Mirko, Ryukyu, Power Woman, Edge Shot, Best Jeanist, Eraserhead, replacing every trace of the Yagi family. As he adjusted a Ryukyu poster on the wall, 3 soft knocks came from the door. "Come in," he said naturally. The base truly felt like home now, a feeling he hadn't had since he was 4. Kenji entered, phone in hand, expression serious yet worried. "We need to talk." Izuku turned, confused. It was rare for Solaris to sound that serious. "What happened?" Kenji showed him the screen. A headline glared at the top. "Pro Hero number 6 Emerald Sun missing." Izuku's face froze, disbelief melting into anger. His eyes scanned the article, and silent fury rose in his chest. Now they care? After more than 3 months? Only now they realize I'm gone. He didn't know whether to laugh or curse. "The post is a week old," Kenji said softly. "They probably just noticed, or were searching for you in secret." Izuku sat on the bed, fingers digging into the mattress. He'd always wanted his family's attention, but now, all he felt was rage that it came too late. "Why now? What changed?" he asked, exhausted. "I don't know," Kenji admitted. "I just saw it and thought you deserved to know." A heavy silence fell. "They ignored me for a decade, called me useless, treated me like a stranger. And now I'm a missing child." Kenji sat beside him. "Can I tell you a secret?" Izuku nodded slowly. "I'm Power Woman's son," Kenji said quietly, as if sharing a distant memory. Izuku's eyes widened in shock. "What? But there's no record of her ever having a child." "And there won't be," Kenji said with a faint smile. "She chose to protect her family's privacy. Didn't want me exposed. Unlike Endeavor, she stayed discreet. I even faked my death to keep it that way." Izuku listened silently, absorbing every word. "That's why I understand heroes who hide their families," Kenji continued. "But I'll never understand a hero who abandons their child. Who lets this kind of pain happen?" He touched the spot on his neck where a burn had once been. Kenji stood, looking at Izuku with purpose. "Come with me. There's someone you should talk to, someone who'll understand." Toya, Harumi, and Yoko sat around a table playing cards. "Guys," Kenji said, "Izuku needs to talk. You 3 know what to do." They nodded immediately. Kenji left the room. Izuku explained everything: the article, his feelings, his frustration at still being tied to the Yagi name. When he finished, Harumi spoke first, voice steady but kind. "My mom died when I was little. My stepmother, a CRC fanatic, raised me. She hated me for being a mutant. Called me a freak. My father just stood there, never defended me." She exhaled deeply. My life only got better when I ran away and joined the guild. I use my real mother's surname to remind myself who I truly am. Toya sighed. I hate my father. He's a bastard and deserves to die. But my siblings, they're innocent. I keep the Todoroki name for them. Yoko snapped her fingers, pulling a jack of hearts from thin air. I made up my last name after I ran away. My past doesn't own me. Like the saying goes, if you live in the past, you're either a museum or an archaeologist. I'm an illusionist, baby. Izuku thought quietly. I don't want my mother's name. And I hate my sisters. So, I'll make a new one. Will help. Yoko said enthusiastically. Ideas came and went until Harumi smiled softly. What about Midoriya? Because of your eyes and hair, Midori means green, and Ya means valley. That's perfect. Yoko said. It's like you walked through a valley and came out renewed like a tree that's finally grown strong. Izuku smiled back. I love it. Thank you, Harumi. And in that moment, Izuku Yagi ceased to exist and Izuku Midoriya, vigilante, analyst, and brother, was born. The soft glow of the training room lamps illuminated the sweat running down Izuku Midoriya's face. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he struggled to catch his breath. Standing before him, arms crossed, was Kenji, better known as Solaris, watching him with a satisfied smile. Not bad, rookie, Kenji said, wiping sweat from the corner of his mouth with his fist. 4 months ago, you couldn't even finish a set of jumping jacks without fainting. Now you're actually making me work. Izuku laughed weakly, lying flat on the mat. His black gym shirt, with gym wear printed in kanji, was drenched in sweat. Still, Izuku panted, it would have been nice to land at least one hit. Kenji scoffed with a smirk. A rookie with 4 months of training almost hitting a veteran who's been fighting since he was 7? Wow, what a tragedy, he teased, extending a hand. Izuku grabbed it, and Kenji helped him to his feet. Izuku scratched the back of his neck. Fair enough. But, can I ask something? Kenji nodded. What exactly is the Shadow Council? You explained it before, but, well, I wasn't exactly in the best emotional state that day. And your explanation was kind of vague. Kenji studied him for a moment, then nodded again. Go shower. Meet me in the briefing room in 15 minutes. 15 minutes later, Izuku found himself in the meeting room. Kenji was already there, organizing a few documents while the others were either getting ready or had already gone out on patrol. Noticing Izuku, Kenji gestured for him to sit. The moment he did, Kenji began to speak. The Shadow Council has existed for about 4 or 5 years now. Izuku blinked, looking puzzled. 5 years? That's younger than I expected, he said thoughtfully. But with all this structure, the resources, the connections in the underworld and beyond, you're telling me you built all of this in just 5 years? Kenji chuckled at Izuku's disbelief. Smaller organizations like the Levelers or the Hunters existed before that. The Vigilante Guild is the newest one. Some of us were already working together, but as a structured council with divisions, purpose, and coordination, that only started about 4 years ago, when we realized where things were heading and had no other choice but to unite. Izuku nodded, intrigued by the story behind such a vast network hidden in the shadows. Kenji continued, leaning back slightly. I guess it's best if I start with my own story. You already know I'm the son of Power Woman, but my father is an underground hero called Hacktrap. Izuku frowned. The name didn't ring any bells. It was strange he knew nearly every hero in Japan, even most underground ones. Never heard of him, Izuku admitted. Kenji smiled faintly. I'm not surprised. My father's always been good at covering his tracks and keeping his identity off the record. Anyway, when I was little, I was diagnosed with a Class V quirk. Izuku's eyes widened. Being born with a Class V quirk without going through an awakening was incredibly rare. It suddenly made sense why no one knew Power Woman and Hacktrap were married. First, having a child with a powerful quirk, and second, Power Woman was Japan's number 5 pro hero, while Hacktrap operated in the underground. Separating their professional and personal lives was only logical. Kenji sighed before continuing. When I was 14, Two HPSC agents approached me after school. They offered me an exclusive training program supposedly to help me refine my quirk and skills so I could become a top hero. But I knew what they really wanted: to brainwash me, to control me. I had too much potential for them to just let me roam free. Izuku frowned deeply. I've heard rumors about that, but I thought it was just a conspiracy theory. I never believed the Hero Commission would go that far. It's true, Kenji said flatly. I refused right away. My parents had always warned me to stay away from the commission, said they weren't good people. And they were right. Not long after I refused, they came back with veiled threats, said my family might start having problems if I didn't comply. That they wouldn't hesitate to interfere with my parents' careers, even as heroes. Izuku understood immediately. Blackmail. So I used a few tricks my father had taught me and contacted someone through the villainette, someone who, if the rumors were true, could help me. Knuckle Duster. I was right. He helped me fake my own death, made it look like a quirk accident. After that, the commission stopped targeting my family. Izuku's jaw dropped. That sounds extreme. Kenji shrugged. It was drastic, but it worked. It got them off my family's back, and I'm sure it discouraged them from trying to recruit my cousin too. But I couldn't stay with the Vigilante Alliance. I needed to disappear, stay off the radar. That's when the Vigilante Guild took me in. Back then, the leader was a vigilante named Rupture. Sadly, he died on a mission a few months after I joined, and the leadership fell to me. I didn't think I was ready, but apparently I've got some sort of natural charisma, or whatever. He smirked faintly, unconcerned. Over time, I realized the HPSC wasn't Japan's only problem. Groups like the CRC, PSI, and QLF were getting bolder, more organized. I managed to get access to confidential intel and noticed the patterns. So I spoke with Knuckle Duster, who had already turned his hatred toward the Commission into founding the Vigilante Alliance. His goal was to bring them down someday. With this information about the crime in Japan, and pointed out the problems with their plan. Izuku tilted his head. What kind of problems? A very simple one, Kenji replied. If we take down the HPSC right now, do you think Starlight, Apostrophe, or Beastly would just sit quietly? No, they'd seize the chaos and start a civil war while the heroes are weakened. Izuku's eyes widened again, finally understanding the implications. I see you understand where I'm going with this, Kenji said. As corrupt as the Commission is, right now they're a necessary evil, a stabilizing force. So I proposed an idea to Knuckle Duster. Unite all the scattered vigilante cells, smaller independent vigilants, and morally gray villains into one secret network. Each group would have its own function, and those who contributed the most would form the High Council, the leadership you now know as the Shadow Council. To the public, the Vigilante Alliance seems small, irrelevant, just a rumor. But in the shadows, we are many. Izuku listened in awe. Kenji smiled faintly, then began explaining each branch of the organization. The Canary Network, led by Black Canary, is our main information source in the underworld. It's composed entirely of women trained in self-defense, often working undercover in markets, bars, even schools in rough neighborhoods. You'd be surprised how much thugs talk when they think no one's listening, or how much children overhear from their parents and repeat to friends. Some of them also infiltrate criminal groups to gather intel directly. Other vigilantes buy their data, but in truth, they distribute it freely to others in need. Innovation, led by Professor Clockwork, provides high-end gear and technical support. They build prototypes, monitor police and medical systems, and even track the villain net for data. The Hunters, led by Azrael, are formed by defectors from extremist groups like CRC, PSI, and QLF. They might agree with their ideals, but not their methods. Their goal is to track and monitor those organizations' movements. They don't have anyone high-ranking enough to dismantle them, but they keep us informed. The Levelers, led by Mr. Compress, are in charge of stealing data from corrupt heroes, shell companies, and villain networks and reallocating funds to keep us running. The Vigilante Alliance, under Knuckle Duster, handles recruitment, essentially our militia and public face, serving as a cover for the rest. And finally, us, the Vigilante Guild. We train elite operatives and field lieutenants. Every guild member can go toe-to-toe with a top hero and have a fair shot at winning. We develop tactics, analyze operations, and prepare agents for the front lines, just like how we're training you to be our strategist and, depending on your quirk, a combat operative. Izuku sat there, both stunned and amazed. That's incredible. I never imagined vigilantes could be this organized. But I guess that's the whole point, isn't it? Kenji nodded in agreement. Exactly. Izuku leaned forward. I have one last question. How do you keep all of this hidden? After so long, someone must have noticed that vigilantes are more coordinated than they seem. Kenji smirked. That's the easy part. We have a few associates who aren't officially part of the council. One of them is the good doctor. Another is called Mind Blank. His quirk manifested late, and it's a powerful one, lets him alter memories through physical contact. He's extremely paranoid about the government finding him. Or Starlight, for that matter. So he reached out to a few vigilantes, and we helped him disappear in exchange for assistance when we need it. Izuku froze for a moment, eyes wide. So you're telling me, if anyone hero or villain ever discovers your secret organization, you can just erase their memories of it, and make sure they spread the idea that the council is nothing but an urban legend. Kenji nodded, checking his watch casually. Exactly. Now, enough talk, we've got to prepare. You've got an appointment. Izuku frowned. Prepare for what? What appointment? Kenji's grin widened. No spoilers. Half an hour later, the two of them stood before a reinforced door that, at first glance, looked completely ordinary. Izuku seemed visibly confused until the door began to glow and opened on its own. The entire frame shimmered with a soft, pulsating violet light. Suddenly, a bald head wearing dark sunglasses poked through the glow. Looks like I arrived right on time, said the man as he stepped through the doorway. He had a lean but athletic build, muscles defined yet not exaggerated, and an average height. He wore a sleek black suit with purple lines running across it, white gloves, and the sunglasses lent him an air of mystery. Izuku took a startled step back, but Kenji approached him casually. Izuku, this is Tomoya Kurenuma, also known as the Doorman. Izuku snapped out of his daze and, almost by reflex, pulled out his trusty notebook. He began mumbling rapid observations and theories about the man's quirk. The doorman chuckled. Softly. Probably a teleportation-type quirk. Unknown range, but it seems capable of transporting multiple people at once. Since he opened the portal through a door instead of midair, it might be easier to anchor portals to existing doorways. Mumble, mumble, mumble. Kenji and the doorman exchanged amused glances. Your theory is correct, the man said, smiling faintly. My quirk is called Doorlink. I can connect two physical doors as long as I've seen both before. It's a fast, safe transport, no limits on passengers or weight. But if one of the doors is destroyed, I lose that portal. Tomoya Kurenuma, Doorman, Quirk Doorlink. Class 4 allows the user to create an instant portal between two different doors. To activate, the user needs to touch a physical doorknob and clearly visualize another door they have seen before. The portal is bidirectional, lasting a few minutes, allowing the movement of allies, objects, or attacks. Izuku was scribbling furiously, smoke almost rising from the pages of his overworked notebook. The three of them stepped through the glowing doorway and emerged inside a fortified underground deposit. Kenji spread his arms dramatically. Welcome to the clock tower, he said, trying to sound epic. Izuku blinked, looked around, and deadpanned. This isn't a tower. Kenji shrugged, unconcerned. I didn't name it. They were led into a large workshop where three figures were busy working. One of them was Professor Clockswork, whom Izuku recognized from the earlier meeting, but this time, the professor was surrounded by a swarm of floating bolts, screws, and circuits, all orbiting around him like tiny satellites. Takahiro Shitoku, Professor Clockswork, Quirk Assembly. Class 4 allows its user to influence, command, and reorganize machines and mechanical structures through the mind. The power acts on mechanical and electromechanical components, motors, gears, simple mechanical circuits, articulated structures, allowing the user to levitate parts, control movements, separate assemblies, and reintegrate them into new configurations. The quirk is not hacking. It does not invade electronic systems when they require credentials, passwords, or digital protocols. Instead, it operates at the physical, structural, and kinetic level of machines, sensing dynamics, applying force vectors, moving assemblies, disassembling and reassembling parts according to a precise mental design. The user needs to have a clear scheme CNC/PTN of what they want to assemble. It is not possible to improvise complex structures without a precise mental plan, and there must be sufficient parts materials in the environment. The power rearranges and reconstructs what already exists. The other two instantly caught Izuku's attention. A man in a gray hoodie, visibly augmented with cybernetic implants, multitasking across 3 separate holographic screens, and a gothic-looking woman with violet hair, green eyes, and an unreadable poker face, typing rapidly on a computer. Kenji gestured toward them as he made introductions. You already know Professor Clock's work. This is Misato Matsumoto, aka Citron, and this is Rin Fujimoto, aka Mystery. They're part of Innovation, our tech division. They handle everything from our communication network to the gadgets we use in the field. Izuku's eyes sparkled with curiosity as he examined each of them, clearly bursting with questions. Before he could speak, Kenji stepped in quickly. I wouldn't ask Citron directly about his quirk, Kenji warned lightly. He's not fond of the topic. But since I already know what you were about to ask, his quirk is Techno-Control, a Class 3 technopathy. Izuku frowned, confused. I've never heard of a technopathy rated lower than Class 4. Kenji nodded. That's true, but do you remember that quirks mostly come with vestigial mutations that help people's bodies adapt to their power? Izuku assents. Well, Techno-Control didn't come with those mutations, meaning that if he tried to communicate with any technology, his brain would end up overloading and he could die of brain death before he could even use his quirk. The cybernetic implants mitigate this effect, which would make it a Class 4 quirk, even if he hadn't lost that upgrade. Misato Matsumoto, Citron, quirk Techno-Control, Class 3 allows mental communication with modern technologies, cell phones, drones, computers, cameras, digital locks. However, this ability does not come with the necessary mutations for the user's brain to handle the large amount of information. Izuku went quiet, realizing what that implied. Some organization must have experimented on him, turning him into a living test subject just to stabilize his own power. Deciding to change the subject, Izuku asked, So, what are we doing here? Kenji smiled knowingly. We've got a gift for you. Now that you're officially one of us, you'll need a proper outfit for missions. Clockwork stopped his telekinetic tinkering, walked over to a mannequin draped with a dark cloth, and yanked it off with a flourish, revealing a black tactical suit reinforced with dark green lines, a crimson utility belt, and a black and green mask. What do you think? Kenji asked with a grin. Izuku's eyes widened with pure wonder. It's incredible, he said, his voice filled with awe. He dreamed of having a hero suit like this since he was a child. Then something clicked in his mind. Wait, this design looks familiar. Clockwork nodded, amused. It should. It's based on one of the sketches from your analysis notebooks. Now go try it on. A few minutes later, Izuku emerged from a side room wearing the full suit. This is amazing, he exclaimed, stretching his arms and throwing a few test punches. Clockwork stepped forward to explain the technical aspects. The suit is made of carbon fiber and abrasion-resistant polymers, with electrical insulation. It includes an internal biometric monitor, encrypted communicator, support for modular attachments, motion sensors, and shock absorbers in the impact zones. He pointed to each hidden system as he spoke, proud of his craftsmanship. Then Mystery approached silently, eyes never leaving the tablet in her hands. She handed Izuku a sleek black smartphone. Finished coding it, she said flatly, her tone detached. Kenji will help you set up your VillainNet account. Kenji chuckled awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. Sorry about the delay. I should have given you this 2 months ago. And sorry about her. She sometimes forgets to turn off her quirk. To call logic to boost her intelligence beyond normal limits, kind of like Nedzu's quirk, but it shuts down the emotional part of her brain as a side effect. Rin Fujimoto, Mystery, Quirk Logic, Class 4 temporarily transforms the user's brain into an organic supercomputer. This allows her to analyze patterns, calculate probabilities in real time, and react with superhuman reflexes, making her a strategist and combatant of lethal precision, although it disables the part of the brain responsible for the user's emotional side. Izuku nodded, looking between the phone in his hand and the suit he now wore. For the first time, he felt it. That he belonged. That he was part of something larger than himself. A force working in the shadows for something greater. For the first time, Izuku Midoriya smiled not as a boy chasing dreams, but as a hero born from the dark. End of Chapter 8. Then, suddenly, Izuku turned toward the camera, breaking the fourth wall. "I am the shadow of a hero," he said solemnly. Kenji blinked. Everyone around stared at him. "Who are you talking to, Izuku?" asked Chimera. "What do you mean?" "I didn't say anything," Izuku said, grinning at the unseen audience. "We might need to stop dropping him on his head during training," Dabi muttered. "He's not right." "Yeah, I'll call the good doctor," Kenji sighed, eyeing Izuku, who was still smiling at the wall. Vigilante Guild. Def C-ranked send invitation to the chat to Midoriya unranked. Midoriya unranked joins the chat with default nickname of Midoriya. "Great son. Attention at everyone, I want to officially welcome at Midoriya to our group chat." Midoriya, hello at everyone. Cat lady, that didn't take long, huh? The musician, agreed. Great son. It's Mystery's fault she took forever to encrypt his phone. Deadly touch, makes sense. Burn burn burn. Anyway kid, welcome. Get ready at Card Queen will change your username soon. Midoriya? Card Queen changed Midoriya's nickname to Ninja Broccoli. Ninja Broccoli, why though? Card Queen, nailed it on the first try. And it's because of your green hair. The, amaze face, bit. Burn burn burn. Is it just me? Or has it G-Force been really quiet? G-Force, don't bother me. I'm tracking some trigger smuggling activity. Living rifle. Great son. Attention at everyone at G-Force is right. Back to your patrols. Also, I'll be taking at Ninja Broccoli on his first patrol tonight. Cat lady, yes boss. Card Queen, yes boss. The musician, yes, boss. G-Force, yes boss. Burn burn burn, yes boss. Living rifle, you know I can't patrol, right? But whatever. Ninja Broccoli, wait what? Izuku turned off his new phone and looked up at Kenji, who watched him with a smirk. Are you serious about taking me on patrol? Izuku asked, frowning. Kenji nodded. Yeah. But just so you know, you're not wearing that suit Clockwork made. Izuku frowned deeper. Then what's the point of having it? Kenji grabbed a backpack from the corner and handed it to him. Because that suit draws way too much attention. It's more advanced than what any regular vigilante uses. We'll go with something more discreet tonight. Izuku opened the bag. Inside was a reinforced shirt, a black and green hooded jacket, cargo pants, combat boots, gloves, a light armor vest, a mask shaped like Endeavor's face, a bottle of temporary black hair dye, and pink contact lenses. For disguise, Kenji explained. Emerald didn't notice your disappearance for 3 months, but now that you're back on the media's radar, we can't take risks. Izuku nodded silently and went to change. Disguised, the two slipped through an old underground tunnel network that led to the outskirts of Mizudafu. The area was rough cracked walls, faded graffiti, and flickering streetlights. As they walked, Kenji said, "In the field we use code names. You already know mine Solaris. But since we're avoiding exposure of the council, call me Def. You thought of one for yourself yet?" Izuku mumbled, "Not really. But why Def?" Kenji chuckled. "It just happened. On one of my first patrols with Rupture, someone asked my vigilante name, so I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. It stuck. But since you haven't decided yet, I'll call you Green for now." Izuku sighed but didn't argue. Kenji continued, "Night patrols are tricky. Fewer heroes around, more crimes happening. Our top priority is to stay unseen. And remember Knuckleduster's rules. Don't attack anyone, just patrol and alert the heroes or police. Never act alone. Always move in pairs. If you're spotted and attacked, self-defense is justified. And if the enemy seems out of your league, they probably are. Retreat immediately and call the pros. He paused. Do small things help pets? Carry groceries for the elderly and people won't report you for using your quirk illegally. It helps build trust with locals. Izuku absorbed every word. But you don't have a quirk yet, so focus on learning. Izuku nodded firmly. As they moved, they spotted 3 men cornering a woman in an alley. Kenji stepped forward. Hey, leave the lady alone. The thugs turned. One of them widened his eyes. It's deaf. That demon vigilante. One lunged at Kenji with blade-like hands, hoping to catch him off guard. Kenji dodged effortlessly and, using 5% of his power, landed a clean punch to the face, knocking the man out cold. The remaining 2 injected themselves with something. One's arms crackled with electricity, the other's muscles bulged grotesquely. Green, take the big one, Kenji ordered, while dodging and attacking the fake static shock. Izuku nodded and charged. The brute swung wildly, his overgrown arms heavy. Izuku darted around him, analyzing. He noticed the man's legs hadn't enhanced, only his upper body. A plan formed instantly. Sliding under a punch, Izuku kicked the man's knee sideways, toppling him. Then, a quick jab to the jaw slammed his head against the wall out cold. Meanwhile, Kenji tossed a smoke bomb, blinding the electric thug. Within seconds, he burst from the haze and landed a powerful kick, knocking the villain unconscious. After the fight, Kenji turned to Izuku. You good? Better than I thought, Izuku panted, glancing at the unconscious brute as the trigger effects wore off. The woman stepped out from behind a dumpster. Thank you. Thank you so much. Kenji smiled under his mask. Call the police. We'll leave before they get here. She nodded, fumbling for her phone. Kenji searched one of the downed villains and pulled out a syringe. Trigger. Common in the underworld but not around here. Trigger a drag that amplifies any quirk, making the user stronger in every sense but at the cost of losing rational thought. It drives the user into a berserker state. Izuku frowned. In the distance, sirens wailed. Time to vanish, said Kenji. They melted back into the shadows, leaving behind unconscious villains and 1 saved civilian. Later that night, the 2 perched atop a tall building, watching the city. The cool breeze brushed Izuku's face as he gazed at the glowing skyline of Mizudafu. It's beautiful, from up here, he murmured. Kenji smiled. The city looks peaceful from this height. But in the shadows, there's always someone moving, someone looking to hurt others. That's why we're here, he said softly. To fight in the dark. To protect the light. We're heroes. Just not by their rules. Silence. Then Izuku asked, Kenji, do we really make a difference? Heroes fight so hard, and even with the vigilantes' help, there are still so many villains. Do we really change anything? Kenji was quiet for a moment. That's exactly why we fight, he finally said. Because no matter how many all mights the world has, there'll always be people who hurt others out of selfishness. We don't fight to end evil, that's impossible. We fight to protect people from evil. He looked out over the city. I once heard something in a pre-quirk anime. As long as there are winners, there will be losers. As long as there's love, there will be hate because hate is born to protect love. Translating the world is unfair, and that will never change. A calm silence settled between them. Another line from that same anime said, as long as humans have free will, there will be conflict. Hate will never disappear. It means that as long as people have different opinions, conflict will exist. So it's up to us, the strong, to protect those who can't protect themselves, Kenji added, smiling faintly at the green-haired boy. They stayed there for a while longer before disappearing once more into the night. Back at the vigilantes' hideout, near dawn, Izuku scribbled notes in his journal. Lessons learned. A vigilante must observe before acting. My analysis helped me take down that villain. Never underestimate an opponent. Even if we can't destroy evil, we must fight to protect those who can't. He closed his notebook with a satisfied sigh just as Kenji walked in, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Thought you'd be asleep, Kenji said. I can't. Still processing everything from taking down a villain without a quirk to realizing we can't actually erase evil, Izuku admitted. Kenji handed him a mug. Welcome to the real world, Green. Izuku laughed. I still can't believe that's gonna be my code name. You'll get used to it, Kenji said with a grin. Everyone starts with a dumb name. Yours isn't dumb, Mr. Def, Izuku teased. That's because I came up with mine. Kenji winked. Izuku chuckled, and for a brief moment, everything felt lighter. The darkness outside was still real, but for the first time in a long while, there was a light within the storm. A few days had passed since Izuku's first patrol. He was sitting in his room with one of his ever-present notebooks, this one dedicated to recording his patrols. His sharp green eyes scanned every page filled with theories and observations about the two criminals he and Kenji had faced. He was still amazed at himself for managing to defeat an opponent with a strength enhancement quirk who had also used trigger, a combination that made him both stronger and more unstable. He was twice my size, Izuku murmured to himself, scribbling notes about trigger's side effects. But his reflexes were slower, and his muscle distribution was uneven. The trigger probably only affected the areas linked to his quirk. His thoughts were interrupted by the vibration of his phone. He picked it up and read the notification. Vigilante Guild. Great son, attention at everyone. Mandatory in-person meeting in 5 minutes. Izuku stood up quickly, closed his notebook, and left his room. He walked to the meeting room where all the members of the guild were already gathered. Taking his usual seat, he glanced around at the serious faces. Moments later, Kenji entered, holding a folder. He spoke calmly, but his tone carried weight. You all remember that small group Izuku and I dealt with 2 days ago? Everyone nodded. They had been briefed the same night the two returned. For context, they were carrying trigger. He handed out a document to each member. Toya rolled his eyes, leaning against the wall as he skimmed through the papers. And what's new about that? Trigger trafficking is depressingly common these days. Kenji nodded slightly but continued. I kept one of the injectors. It still had some of the substance inside. I sent it to Clockwork for analysis. These are his results. Harumi crossed her arms, not even glancing at the papers. And what's so urgent about that? Trigger is trigger. Nothing we can do. There are hundreds of amateurs cooking the stuff in their basements. Kenji looked around before replying, his voice low but firm. This trigger was enhanced. Kana raised a skeptical eyebrow. Again, that's hardly new. Variants pop up every month. Kenji shook his head. No. This one isn't just another variant. It's refined, more potent, more stable. And here's the real problem. The chemical markers match samples from all across Japan. The same pattern. The same source. The room grew tense. Yoko was the first to connect the dots. So we're not talking about some back alley cook. Whoever's making this has resources enough to mass produce and distribute trigger without drawing police or hero attention. Exactly, said Kenji. Whoever it is has been doing this for at least 3 years since the start of the new trigger epidemic. To operate that long, at that scale, unnoticed, we're talking rank F, maybe even rank S organization. A heavy silence followed. Toya broke it first. So, what's the council going to do about it? Kenji's eyes hardened. We'll meet in 1 hour to decide our next move. But that's not all. He turned to Izuku. Izuku, remember when you asked what's been happening to Japan lately? Turns out, CRC, PSI, and QLF have all gone completely silent for 4 months. That's not normal, it's dangerous. Izuku frowned. Why is their silence dangerous? Kenji sighed. Because it's the calm before the storm. The last time one of them went quiet this long, it ended with a bombing campaign that killed over 100 people. And now all 3 extremist groups in Japan have gone dark. No chatter, no movement. That kind of quiet means they're planning something big. The weight of his words settled heavily in the room. Everyone nodded silently, understanding the gravity of the situation. Harumi, Kenji continued, you'll take Izuku on patrol tonight. Hana, prepare for the council meeting. They all dispersed to their tasks, carrying the tension of an unseen threat looming ever closer, one none of them could yet define. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp over the round table. Seated around it were the auto-counselors, Azrael and Hattie representing the Hunters, Black Canary and Bluebird of the Canary Network, Mr. Compress and Gentle Criminal of the Levelers, Professor Clockswork and Citron of Innovation, Knuckleduster and the Crawler of the Vigilante Alliance, and finally, Solaris and Entropy of the Vigilante Guild. Kenji Solaris stood, presenting the trigger analysis results while the others listened in silence. Black Canary spoke first. We might have a lead. One of my birds in Aichi works at a shop near the city hall. She reported that a member of the Yakuza Shai Hasaikai showed up there and started bragging quietly, but clearly about how trigger business was booming. It's not much, but it's the best lead we've had. Knuckleduster stroked his beard, thoughtful. I agree, it may not be much, but it's a lead worth following. Crawler frowned. I thought the Yakuza were gone. Solaris nodded. So did I. The Yakuza were nearly wiped out after All Might returned from the US and launched that massive crackdown on the underworld. Azrael's voice rumbled deeply. The brutal ones were wiped out. The discreet ones endured. Citron projected holographic data onto the wall. Records on Shai Hasaikai are scarce, but we've confirmed recent movement in that area matching the rise in trigger activity. These logs predate the Council's formation. Clockswork looked up from his tablet. This is not a surprise. The Yakuza has become a joke in the modern era, but some shadows are persistent. Solaris turned to Black Canary. Keep your birds watching those movements. She nodded silently. Azrael crossed his arms, shifting the topic. And the rest of the underworld? Still quiet. Too quiet, said Canary. Even the strange rumors I received about Hokkaido have stopped. That's not normal. I can't confirm what's happening there, and that bothers me. Knuckleduster nodded grimly. In my experience, that kind of silence always means something worse is coming. We should prepare for anything. Agreed, Solaris ordered. Maximum alert until further notice. We'll act once we know what's coming. Crawler glanced at Solaris. And the kid? How's Izuku doing? Solaris allowed a faint smile. Physically? The good doctor patched him up perfectly. His weight stabilized thanks to the nutrition regimen, but his muscle growth is faster than expected. We suspect some kind of passive quirk factor. Surprised murmurs filled the table. A quirk? Gentle asked dramatically. But he's registered as quirkless. He told us himself. He was, Solaris corrected. The doctor detected dormant quirk factor traces. He's expected to awaken something within 8 months, maybe less. The council exchanged shocked but hopeful glances. And mentally? Asked Canary, concerned. Discoveries like that can be heavy, especially after what he's been through. Recovering, Solaris answered softly. We've been taking him to a subworld psychologist with a quirk that accelerates trauma healing. Can't erase memories, but helps him rebuild. Shame she doesn't have a legal license. Azrael gave a silent nod. I also took him on patrol once, Solaris continued. He knocked out a villain who possessed a strength-enhancing quirk and was using trigger. Using logic and observation, a well-placed blow to the villain's legs caused him to lose his balance, and a well-placed punch made him hit his head against a wall, rendering him unconscious. Impressive, murmured Mr. Compress. Solaris looked to Crawler. You deserve credit for finding that diamond in the rough. Once his quirk awakens, he'll be one of our most formidable and terrifying lieutenants. The others nodded in agreement. Suddenly, Solaris's phone buzzed. He answered. Izuku? Slow down, what do you mean you gave blood in an alley? Wait, you took who where? I'm on my way. He hung up and turned to the others. We'll adjourn here. Canary with me. We have something urgent to check out. And I might need your expertise. Without another word, Solaris and Black Canary left the chamber, their footsteps echoing into the darkness, unaware that the storm they feared had already begun to stir. A few hours before the council meeting, the Vigilantes' den was unusually quiet. Kenji had dismissed the guild members so he and Hana could prepare. Meanwhile, Toya stood with his arms crossed, leaning against the wall of the room, a mocking smile spreading across his face. So, are the bets still open on how long it'll take for those two to finally start dating? Because it's getting boring just watching this drag on, he said with his usual sarcastic tone. Izuku frowned. What? Yoko laughed. Oh Greenie, you're so naive. Kenji and Hana are so obviously in love with each other. Kenji's in denial, and Hana's pretending not to feel anything because she's waiting for him to make the first move. Classic. Harumi, sitting on one of the benches, spoke with her usual indifference. We're trying not to interfere. Better to let them move at their own pace. At that moment, Despero's voice echoed telepathically in everyone's minds. Translation, they're all afraid of pissing Hana off. Izuku just nodded slowly, still not fully understanding. Harumi stood up and looked at him calmly. Get ready. We're patrolling tonight. Izuku nodded again, this time with more enthusiasm, and went to suit up. 20 minutes later, both were ready, wearing simple vigilante gear. Harumi, now in full patrol mode, glanced at Izuku, analyzing his uniform. So, Green, that's your vigilante name? She asked curiously. It wasn't bad, but it could be better. Actually, I'm not sure. I was thinking of another name, but I don't know if I should use it. On one hand, it'd be a punch in the face to everyone who looked down on me. On the other, I'm not sure I'd ever move on from my past that way. She raised an eyebrow. And why not? What does it have to do with your past? Izuku sighed before answering. Before I joined the guild, my childhood friend and my sister never called me by my real name. I was diagnosed as quirkless. The only name anyone used for me was Deku, which basically means useless. He looked down, old memories flashing through his mind. Harumi listened silently. I thought about using Deku as my vigilante name. After all, we all have two names, our street name and our official one. I haven't decided on the official one yet, but I wanted to use Deku. He paused, eyes distant. That name still hurts, but I don't want to live in the shadow of who I used to be. I want that weak, pathetic Deku to disappear, you know? I want to prove I'm not useless, that I can do good, even without a quirk. His tone carried an honest determination, the kind only true heroes have. Then, with a shy smile, he added, I know it sounds like something straight out of a shounen anime speech, but that's really how I feel. Harumi smiled, that signature feline grin of hers, pleased to see him grow. I get your point. If you use that name, you're showing that labels don't define you, but at the same time, you're wearing a scar as an identity. You'll never really move on. She tapped her chin thoughtfully. Don't you have any references to draw from? I got my street name from an old pre-quirk cartoon. Maybe you could do the same. Izuku thought for a moment. You're right. I don't want my identity to be a scar, he murmured. Then he remembered something he used to read when he was alone, which was almost all the time. There is something I could use, he said, taking a deep breath. Back when I got beaten up at school and had to patch myself up alone. Harumi narrowed her eyes slightly, quietly storing that detail for later. I used to spend hours online looking for something to read. That's when I found a fanfic called Vidian, the Green Guide. It was about a hero without powers in a world full of them helping others in his own way. I wanted to be like him. So, call me Vidian. Harumi smiled. Vidian, huh? Way better than Green or Deku, she said with a teasing grin. And don't worry about that shounen speech. This is a fanfic written by two young adults. We're closer to a shounen than anything else. Izuku blinked in confusion. Wait, what do you mean by that? I don't know what you're talking about, she replied quickly, changing the subject. Anyway, I'm Chimera, but during patrols like this, I usually go by Kitty Noir. Less suspicious. Izuku just nodded, letting it go. Their patrol took place in Mizudafu's nightlife district, an area known for bars and clubs. Harumi explained that few heroes bothered to patrol there, since it didn't attract media attention, which left room for trouble. The night seemed peaceful enough. A few drunks being guided home, the occasional suspicious sound quickly resolved. Until Vidian heard something from a nearby alley. Stay here, he told Kitty before running off to investigate. As he approached, he saw a disturbing sight. A girl with sandy blonde hair tied into two messy buns, wearing a tattered school uniform, was holding a knife against a man on the ground. Without hesitation, Vidian leaped down from the rooftop, landing hard enough to make her flinch. The man used the distraction to push her away and flee. "Thanks, kid. That psycho almost cut me," the man yelled as he disappeared. Vidian turned toward the girl. She smiled too wide, showing two sharp canines. "You're kinda cute, you know that? But I bet you'd look even cuter, covered in blood." Her grin turned feral as she lunged forward with unnatural speed. Vidian barely reacted in time, twisting his body to dodge. She attacked again, her knife flashing under the streetlight. He rolled, dodged, countered with a quick side kick which she blocked easily. Still, he didn't back down. While fighting, his mind raced through analysis. Erratic movements, impulsive pattern, red veins in the eyes, dilated pupils, accelerated breathing. Euphoria mixed with withdrawal and that fixation on blood. Could her quirk depend on blood consumption? "You need blood, don't you?" he asked between dodges. She laughed high-pitched and unhinged. "Ha, yeah, I need it. I love it. But I'm not a monster, I swear. I just need it." She trembled in desperation. He hesitated. And then, against all common sense, not that he had much, he rolled up his sleeve and extended his arm. "Then take mine," he said softly, as if speaking to a frightened animal. She blinked, confused. "Wait, you're serious?" "Yes," he answered firmly. She stepped closer, took his arm, and sank her teeth into it. Vidian felt pressure, but surprisingly little pain, only discomfort. Is there some kind of natural anesthetic in her fangs? A mutation maybe? He wondered. She drank for several seconds, like someone dying of thirst. Then, as if reality hit her all at once, she stopped, trembling, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she whimpered before collapsing unconscious. Kitty Noir arrived seconds later. "Vidian. What happened here?" she asked in alarm. "I'm not sure yet, but she needs help. Now." A few minutes later, the duo brought the unknown girl to the good doctor's underground clinic where Vidian promptly received a monumental scolding. "A blood donation in an alley, kid? Are you out of your mind?" shouted the doctor, examining his arm. "I didn't see another option," muttered Izuku, avoiding eye contact. "Of course you didn't, because it was an absurdly altruistic idea. If she had a blood-borne disease, you'd be done for. You're just lucky that most blood-related quirks carry specialized antibodies." He whacked Izuku's shin with his cane for emphasis. Izuku flinched and hung his head. Kitty crossed her arms. "I agree with the scolding. But what's done is done. How is she?" Naoki sighed. "Underweight, malnourished, anemic. Already took half a blood bag and seems stable, for now." The girl groaned and opened her eyes. Seeing them, she started crying. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I'm a monster. They were right." "No, you're not a monster. You're just a girl who needs help," said Izuku gently, stepping closer. "Normal people don't drink blood," she screamed, trying to break free. Vidian and Kitty restrained her while the doctor injected a mild sedative. Moments later, a golden portal opened in the wall. Solaris and Black Canary stepped through. Solaris looked around, then at the girl. "That's her." Vidian nodded. Solaris continued. "I recognize her. Himiko Toga. Wanted for assaulting a classmate by drinking his blood through a straw. Then vanishing. She's been living on the streets since, attacking strangers in alleys and, well, drinking their blood." Vidian frowned. "So I was right. Her quirk probably requires blood consumption." Naoki nodded. "Most likely. There are medical supplements and authorized treatments for that, but judging by her condition, she was denied access to them." Kitty spoke quietly. She said normal people don't drink blood. Silence filled the room. Solaris folded his arms. "Then it was her parents. I've seen this before, people born with unique biological needs due to their quirks, denied those needs out of fear or disgust. It always ends the same, with someone losing their mind trying to fill the void." Kitty remembered her stepmother calling her a monster. Izuku remembered Bakugo screaming that he was a mistake. Black Canary stepped forward. Now I see why you called me Solaris. I'll talk to her. I have experience with girls like this. Vidian looked at Solaris, puzzled. She runs a support center in Hiroshima for women who've suffered abuse, Solaris explained. Vidian nodded, understanding. Black Canary smiled softly. When she wakes up, I'll talk to her. It'll take time, but I'll let you know if anything changes. Solaris, Vidian, and Kitty returned to the den hopeful that maybe, just maybe, that girl could have a second chance. A month had passed since the encounter with Himiko Toga. The underworld remained in absolute silence. The three largest radical organizations CRC, PSI, and QLF had been inactive for 5 months. The major criminal factions, the Glass House, the Golden Empire, and the Mechanist Tower operated only at their usual commercial pace. No signs of major movements. And that worried the Shadow Council. The entire High Council was gathered in the Vigilantes' den meeting room. Azrael, Hattie, Black Canary, Blue Bird, Mr. Compress, Gentle Criminal, Professor Clockswork, Citron, Knuckle Duster, Crawler, Solaris, and Entropy. A full meeting was rare. The last had been the month before, and they almost never assembled 2 months in a row. But the tension and paranoia in the air made one thing clear. Something was wrong. The silence in the underworld wasn't total. A few CRC houses were still operating. PSI had stirred up a small isolated riot, but QLF was completely inactive. And the crime syndicates, the Glass House, the Golden Empire, and the Mechanist Tower, though still active, remained confined to routine operations. No unusual movement. And that was the most frightening part. To make matters worse, Black Canary and Knuckle Duster, with their numerous connections in the underworld, had found no useful intel. Mr. Compress, an S-rank supervillain himself, was also in the dark. The lack of information pushed every council member to the brink of paranoia. Solaris was the first to speak. Everyone feels it. Something is very wrong. But Black Canary asked for this meeting. She has news about the Shai Hasaikai. Canary began her briefing. An image appeared on one of the screens. A cold-looking man wearing a black plague doctor mask with golden accents and round glasses, a long white raincoat with the hood up, though part of his hair, strangely reminiscent of clock hands, was still visible. This is Hari Kurono. Codename, Chronostasis. Second in command of the Shai Hasaikai. He was spotted in Aichi negotiating trigger with the local gang. One of my birds managed to follow discreetly and collected a sample of the drag. Clockswork adjusted the holographic projector and added, "The trigger composition is identical to the one Solaris and Vidian recovered weeks ago. Same refinement, same molecular pattern. It's becoming increasingly clear that this Yakuza group is behind the latest variants we've seen." Canary continued. The Canary network dug deeper. The former head of the Yakuza was removed after mysteriously falling ill. Their current leader is Kai Chisaki, known as Overhaul. According to our intel, there's an extensive system of underground tunnels beneath their base. One of our agents, who has a sonar-based quirk, confirmed it. That alone would justify an official hero investigation, Solaris noted. But Canary switched the projection. Now it showed a child about 4 years old wearing hospital clothing, arms wrapped in bandages. The fear in her eyes was overwhelming. This image was captured by the same agent. The girl was accompanied by a Yakuza member. The situation was far too suspicious to ignore. A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone arrived at the same conclusion. Until Entropy stood up. That's enough. No waiting for heroes. We're dealing with this ourselves. No one dared disagree. Solaris nodded. The Vigilantes Guild will lead the operation. But we need full support. Canary, keep your birds monitoring all movements. Despair will reinforce your team. Canary nodded firmly. Clockswork, Citron, track everything you can about the Yakuza members with Mysterio's help. And if necessary, Gentle Criminal's wife, La Brava, can assist. She'll be delighted, Gentle said with a restrained smile. I'll send Izuku to work with you in innovation, Solaris continued. We'll need him to analyze every quirk we can identify. patterns, weaknesses, anything that might give us an edge. We'll also need Spectra, Solaris added, turning to Azrael. I trust you can release her. Azrael nodded curtly. Are we sure the boy is ready for something this big? Compress asked. Not doubting his skills, but this is a major operation. We understand your concern, but Izuku is more than ready, Entropy replied. And once he sees the reason for this mission, she pointed at the image of the little girl, he won't hesitate for a second. With everything settled, Solaris declared the meeting adjourned. When they returned to the den, Solaris sent a message to the guild chat. Vigilante Guild. Great son, meet in the living room in 5 minutes. Urgent meeting. Minutes later, everyone was there. Izuku, Harumi, Yoko, Toya, Kana, Aoi, Yoshi, and Despero. The atmosphere was heavy, expressions tense. Solaris and Entropy entered. Solaris got straight to the point. We've made progress on the trigger investigation. We traced it back to an old Yakuza group called the Shai Hasaikai. They're distributing the drag. But that's not all, Kenji said, activating the projector. The image of the little girl appeared on the table. Everyone's expression shifted immediately. Harumi clenched her fists. Yoko looked away, eyes tearing up. Toya gritted his teeth. Kana hugged her own arms tightly. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the fear on the child's face. Our plan was to hand this to the heroes. But after seeing this, we're not waiting. We're taking action, Solaris declared. After seeing her, this mission is ours, Entropy added firmly. The mood shifted. A grim determination filled the room. Solaris turned to Despair. You'll join the Canary Network. Assist in gathering intel with your telepathy. Despair, who usually avoided working outside the guild, simply nodded. Izuku, Solaris continued, turning to him, you'll work directly with innovation. You'll help compile everything we gather on the Yakuza members, analyze their quirks, search for weaknesses, anything you find useful. Every detail matters. Izuku stood, more determined than ever. Leave it to me. We'll show those Yakuzas what we can do. Solaris gave a faint smile. Then get ready. We're taking down a Yakuza. Less than a week later, every member of the Vigilante Guild Kenji, Hana, Despair, Kana, Toya, Aoi, Yoshi, Yoko, Harumi, and Izuku was gathered in the Taka's briefing room, compiling everything they had uncovered about the Shai Hasaikai. Kenji took the lead, his expression stern. Canary Network just finished a full analysis of the Hasaikai compound. Thanks to the sonar quirk of one of their agents, we now have a complete map of the underground sector. He pressed a button, and a three-dimensional hologram of the complex rose above the digital table, detailed and layered, with red, blue, and yellow markings indicating priority routes and rooms. On top of that, he continued, thanks to Despair, we have a very accurate idea of what happens in each of these rooms. Despair, the black cat with piercing blue eyes, sat on the table, tail swaying lazily. Despite his feline appearance, everyone there knew the truth. Behind the fur was a razor-sharp mind. The fact that Despair was a literal cat with a telepathic quirk made him the perfect information gatherer. After all, who would ever suspect a stray cat to be a sentient being capable of reading minds? Kenji then turned to Izuku. Izuku, you're up. Izuku drew a shaky breath. He was clearly nervous, clutching the familiar notebook he carried to every mission. Right. Here are the analyses of the main members of the Shai Hasaikai, also known as the 8 Bullets. His tone shifted into a more serious one. He activated the monitor, projecting images of the targets one by one. Starting with Shin Nemoto. His quirk forces people to tell the truth whenever he asks a direct question. We don't know if it triggers only through voice or also eye contact. Avoid prolonged encounters, and end the fight as fast as possible. He doesn't have a combat quirk, but he's a decent hand-to-hand fighter, like most Hasaikai members. Izuku's gaze swept across the group. Don't underestimate them. Also, if he questions you, try answering in another language. His quirk forces truth but not necessarily language alignment. It's just a theory, but most of you speak English or something else. It might confuse him long enough for you to take him down. He moved to the next target. Rikiya Katsukame. After analyzing all data, I concluded he can drain physical stamina by touch, increasing his own strength. Possibly one of their most dangerous fighters. We don't know if it activates only when he touches you or if it works both ways. End the fight quickly. Toya Setsuno. Evidence suggests he can pull objects toward himself with precision like limited telekinesis. Range and weight limit still unknown. Yuhojo. His quirk allows him to generate crystal structures from his skin. Their durability is unknown, but since he uses them for defense, expect something around reinforced concrete or steel. They're sharp, be careful with cutting attacks. We don't know if he can shoot them, so stay alert. Sormitsu Tabe. This is one of the vaguest ones. He seems to possess a quirk that allows him to consume any kind of material. A type of consumption mutation. We don't know the effects or specifics, but it's an active quirk. He shows no secondary mutation traits. Hekiji Tengai. He has a force field quirk. We don't know how much his barrier can withstand, but don't waste time trying to break it. He needs to remain stationary to maintain it, so leave him behind and move on. Didoro Sakaki. He induces vertigo in people around him, but only when he's drunk. He can choose the target, meaning allies aren't affected. Sounds weird, but don't underestimate him. Lastly, Kendo Rappa. His quirk appears to increase the speed and power of his punches. We're not sure how, but I theorize that the more he strikes, the stronger and faster he gets. As you saw, he's naturally strong whether by size or quirk. A pure close combat monster. When Izuku finished that set, silence hung in the room. They don't sound that tough, Toya said with a shrug. That's exactly what they want you to think, Hana replied. Never underestimate the enemy. Kenji crossed his arms. Knuckleduster reviewed this list. He recognized Kendo Rappa. The guy used to fight in underground arenas. He's a monster in physical combat. Not someone you want to PSS off. Everyone nodded. Kenji gestured for Izuku to continue. The last three are even more concerning. He flipped to another page. Joy Irinaka. His quirk lets him possess surfaces, walls, floors, ceilings, and control them from within. He's a priority target. If you see him, take him out immediately. If not, he will possess the ground or the walls and crush or separate you. He's extremely dangerous. Some of the members exchanged uneasy looks. Hari Kurono. A speed manipulation quirk. We still don't know if it affects movement, perception, or both. He uses it through his hair, which resembles clock hands. Do not let him touch you. And finally, Kai Chisaki, also known as Overhaul. Silence. Izuku's tone darkened. His quirk is officially classified as Class 3 Slight Matter Alteration by Touch. But Yoko narrowed her eyes. But what? But the Canary Network witnessed him turning a person into a puddle of blood, and then reconstructing them. Alive. The room fell utterly silent. That's not a Class 3 quirk, Yoshi muttered. No, Izuku said. That's Class V. He can reorganize matter on a molecular level. Organic or inorganic doesn't matter. A heavy tension spread through the room until Toya suddenly blinked. Wait, how did you even find his classification file? I thought quirk registries were unhackable. They are. But Chisaki attended the University of Tokyo when he supposedly left the Yakuza. I think they funded his studies. University records are much easier to hack. University of Tokyo? Yoko asked. Yes. Kai Chisaki studied and graduated in medicine. He has a medical license. Technically the youngest surgeon to graduate their top of his class, considered a prodigy. Izuku paused. While studying, he also took courses in biochemistry and genetics. After earning his medical license, he stayed and graduated with honors again, earning a degree in biochemistry. He was recruited by several research institutions, even I-Island, but turned them all down before disappearing. I believe he returned to the Yakuza after that. Another pause. Don't engage him in close combat. Don't even get near him. Unless you have long-range attacks like Dabi or Kana, if he touches you, knowing what we know about his quirk and his medical knowledge. Izuku fell silent. But the meaning was clear. Game over. Kenji rubbed his face, absorbed. This is SS rank villain material, maybe even SSS. Growing stronger right under everyone's nose. Kana crossed her arms. That's because the world thinks the Yakuza died out. No one bothers paying attention anymore. And that's what makes them dangerous, Harumi muttered. So, Yoko said, dropping her usual flamboyant persona, what's the plan? Kenji activated another projection. The levelers will create a distraction. Compress will attack their main compound. Chaos and theft fit his style, no one will question it. That keeps heroes and police busy. Hana continued. The hunters will lend us spectra. She'll teleport us directly inside the complex. We get in, rescue the girl, and tear the Yakuza down from the inside. Izuku raised a hand. Why aren't we deploying Knuckle Duster or Azrael directly? Kenji looked at him. Because the Shadow Council must remain in the shadows. If we send all our assets at once, it'll draw attention. That's why we're going in with our regular field gear. But, if anything goes wrong, they'll be our backup. Izuku nodded in understanding. Kenji stood. Suit up. Gather your gear. Tonight, we bring down a Yakuza. The tension in the Vigilantes' den was almost palpable. About an hour had passed since the decisive meeting, and now the entire guild stood assembled and prepared. Kenji, Hana, Despair, Kana, Toya, Aoi, Yoshi, Yoko, Harumi, and Izuku were lined up before the central table, each in their mission gear, fully ready for what was to come. Then, a rectangular shimmer of yellow light appeared in the corner of the room, spinning softly like a frame of energy. From it emerged the levelers, Mr. Compress and Gentle Criminal at the front, followed by figures Izuku didn't recognize. The first was an adult man with an athletic build, dressed in a tight black and white suit with a mask covering his entire face. Beside him appeared a young woman in her early 20s, also athletic, with a harmonious silhouette. Her face was immediately striking. She had heterochromia, one crystal blue eye and the other a vibrant pink, and her hair mirrored the same duality, giving off a peculiar glow. She wore the uniform of a private school. Another young woman followed, equally athletic. Her tattoos stood out, they looked like spray-painted art directly on her skin. She had piercing red eyes, short blue hair with purple tips, and an indifferent expression. She wore a graffiti-covered black leather jacket, a purple tank top, ripped jeans, combat boots, tactical gloves, and a skull mask. On her back was a backpack stuffed with what appeared to be spray paint cans. The last figure was another young woman, around 20, with an athletic build and a pronounced hourglass shape. Her vibrant green eyes and long blonde hair were impossible to ignore, as were her tight bodysuit, utility belt, and the gas mask resting at her neck. Her presence was striking and, to Izuku's surprise, he found her absurdly beautiful. His heart skipped. He quickly looked away, trying to regain composure. Kenji stepped forward to introduce them. You already know Mr. Compress and Gentle Criminal, right? He asked Izuku. Both levelers nodded respectfully. Kenji then gestured to the masked man. This is Jean Babaigawara, codename Twice. Nice to meet you. Twice said cheerfully, then added, We're lying. We didn't want to come here. He crossed his arms, attempting intimidation. Izuku blinked, puzzled. Kenji clarified. He has dissociative identity disorder. He contradicts himself a lot. But he's reliable. Izuku nodded, still intrigued. Kenji pointed to the bicolored girl. Haruka Inoue, codename Crazy. Hi. You must be Izuku. It's a pleasure, she said with a bright smile. He then gestured to the graffiti artist. Nami, codename Karma. She only offered a disinterested wave. Izuku immediately noted how similar her attitude was to Aoi's. But before Kenji could introduce the blonde, she stepped forward on her own, wearing a stuck smile and a mischievous gleam in her eyes. She walked toward Izuku with slow, deliberate steps. Misaki Haruki, also known as Spectra, she said, stopping close enough for him to feel her presence. And you're the green? She looked him up and down. I must say, you're much cuter than the reports suggested, and they were already generous. She winked. With that face, those emerald eyes, And that shy look, you really should come with a warning, dangerously adorable. Izuku turned red instantly, unable to form a coherent sentence. I'd never. Relax, sweetheart, she purred teasingly. I'm just messing with you, though I hit the mark, didn't I? Looks like you've never been praised by a girl before. Izuku went silent, visibly flustered. Spectra's playful expressions softened slightly. That's sad, she murmured. Before anyone could react, she stepped forward and pulled him into a tight hug. But due to their height difference, Izuku's face ended up pressed exactly against her generous chest. The boy froze, feeling his soul nearly leave his body. The room erupted in laughter, some trying and failing to hide it. Even Gentle had to cover his mouth. Harumi watched the scene with a faint hint of irritation and jealousy. Kenji cleared his throat loudly. Spectra, better let him go before he combusts on the spot. And he's not green anymore, he added with a smile. He's Vidian now. Spectra stepped back and winked, utterly unapologetic. Just breaking the ice. Kenji then addressed the group, now serious. You all remember the plan? Right. Everyone nodded, adjusting their masks. Spectra, prepare the portal. With a graceful motion, the blonde traced a glowing circle in the air, which folded inward until it formed a portal. Compress, ready for the show? Always, my friend, he said, spinning his cane. He and the levelers stepped through the portal, emerging outside the Shai Hasaikai complex. The chaos they would cause would serve as the main distraction. Kenji then looked at Spectra and Izuku. You two retrieve the girl. The rest of us will handle the 8 bullets and overhaul. Spectra opened another portal. They all passed through. The portal opened inside the compound. The moment they arrived, they found 3 enemies waiting. Sormitsutabe, Yuhojo, and 5 henchmen. Yoko pulled one of her cards and threw it at Tabe, but he devoured it with a wet snap. Looks like Viridian's theory was correct, she murmured. Kenji knocked out a henchman with a punch and called out quick orders. Gambler, musician, handle them. Quickly. The rest with me. Musician and Gambler nodded and stayed to face the villains while the others vanished through another of Spectra's portals. The fight began instantly. Yuhojo crystallized his body while 2 henchmen charged at Musician. The young man waited for them to get close, then clapped his hands, unleashing a sonic wave that deafened and disoriented them enough for him to knock both out with 2 precise strikes. Neat trick, Hojo said, crystallizing his entire left arm. But it won't work on me. He turned his head, revealing his ears were also coated in crystal. Musician sent a direct sonic burst, which had no effect. Yeah, seems like it really won't, he thought before being surrounded by 2 more henchmen. This is going to be tedious, he muttered in his monotone voice. Meanwhile, Gambler threw another card at Tabe, who devoured it again. She shifted strategies just as she was surrounded by 3 henchmen, 2 unarmed and 1 wielding a baseball bat with Tabe directly ahead. Gambler smiled excitedly. Let's dance. She pulled a card and threw it at the man with the bat. The card sliced through the weapon like butter, cutting it cleanly in half and leaving the man frozen in shock. The thug on the left took advantage of the opening and lunged, attempting to punch her. Gambler dodged, grabbed his arm, twisted it, flipping him over in midair before he slammed onto his back. She finished him with a kick to the face. The thug on the right also attacked. Gambler simply stepped aside, letting him swing at empty air. She used the opening to deliver a low kick to his knee, knocking him to the ground before finishing with a direct punch to the face. The man with the broken bat recovered from his shock and charged. With a flick of her hand, Gambler guided the card that had sliced the bat and embedded it into his calf. He collapsed to his knees, allowing her to spin kick him into unconsciousness. She pulled another card, a king of clubs, and threw it at Tabe. He swallowed it out of reflex. Gambler smirked. King of clubs, fog domain. She snapped her fingers, making Tabe begin to cough violently as smoke poured from his mouth. She dashed forward and punched him square in the face, knocking him out. You know, street thugs have given me more trouble, she commented, dusting herself off until a crash caught her attention. Turning around, she saw Yuhojo had pinned Yoshi against the wall with his crystals. You're good, but you won't stop our young boss from healing the world, Hojo declared, crystallizing more layers. You won't even say anything? Did you know an object can break apart if exposed to sound waves at its natural frequency? Musician replied calmly, ignoring him. And that I recently learned to sense it? Hojo raised a confident eyebrow. So what? As long as I cover your hands with crystal, you can't use your quirk. Who said I only need my hands? Musician murmured. His body began to vibrate. The crystals covering him cracked, then shattered. A powerful sonic wave erupted from his chest. Symphony of rupture, he said, increasing the attack's intensity. The crystals covering Hojo split apart all at once, making the villain scream before collapsing unconscious. Yoshi stopped the attack once the villain was down. He approached and assessed the damage, multiple injuries and a clearly broken arm. Hojo would live despite the consequences. Yoshi walked back to Yoko, who had watched the fight while eating a special protein bar. You could have helped, he said in his usual deadpan. She shrugged. Before they could argue, La Brava's voice crackled through the communicator. Gambler, musician, the entrance to the underground passage is nearby. Seems to be behind a wall with a vase. They ran to the indicated spot. Musician touched the wall and sent out a high-frequency sound wave. The concrete cracked and collapsed, revealing a secret passage. They descended quickly, each aware of their mission. Some minutes earlier, in the Shai Hasaikai's underground lab, Kai Chisaki examined a blood sample in a test tube. His cold eyes reflected the crimson fluid with unsettling calm. Chronostasis rushed in. We have a problem. The compound is under attack. Heroes? Overhaul asked without looking up. No. Mr. Compress and his group. Overhaul frowned. He found us. No matter. Seal off the underground. Let the precepts handle the intruders. Chronostasis nodded, but an alarm blared through the room. Someone breached the facility. They're inside. Overhaul immediately stood, storing the test tube and his documents. Get airy. We're leaving. Now. Spectra's yellow portal faded the moment the vigilantes passed through. Kenji, Def, Hana, Dust, Despair, Aoi, Gravity, Toya, Flame, and Harumi, Kitty Noir, were now in the underground tunnels. Viridian and Spectra had already gone ahead to retrieve the girl, while the rest prepared to face the remaining 6 members of the 8 Bullets. They advanced with caution. Their steps echoed through the stone and metal corridor. The deeper they went, the heavier the atmosphere felt, until a presence announced itself even before appearing. At the end of the hall, Joy Irinaka materialized with a tense expression. How did you find this place? He asked, voice tight with anxiety. That's none of your concern, Dust replied coldly. Joy's frown deepened. A shame. Before they could react, he pulled out a syringe and jammed it into his arm. His eyes glowed unnaturally as trigger rushed through his system. Then Irinaka abandoned what seemed to be a puppet serving as a vessel and, like a living shadow, fused into the walls and floor. Everything warped. The walls rippled. The floor split as if breathing. Cracks opened violently, separating the group in seconds. Def and Despair fell through a fissure. Kitty Noir and Gravity were SCKD through an opening in the wall. Dust and Flame remained together as the corridor collapsed around them. Def and Despair tumbled through an uneven tunnel, landing with a thud in a wide, dimly lit chamber. Def rose, brushing dust off his uniform. We need to find the others, he said, but before he could take 2 steps, 2 figures emerged from the shadows. Kendo Rappa cracked his knuckles with a wild grin. Hikiji Tengai stood in a defensive stance, gaze sharp as blades. You're not going anywhere, Tengai said coolly. Not without a good fight. Rappa roared, charging with surprising speed. Rappa opened with a barrage of brutal punches, but Def activated his quirk, dodging with precision. When Rappa paused to breathe, Def charged 10% of his shining sun, golden light radiating from his body, and launched an attack. It was intercepted by Tengai, who summoned a barrier just in time. The structure cracked visibly. Interesting, he muttered, dispelling it. Rappa lunged again with another whirlwind of blows. Def dodged, waiting for another opening. And just as Rappa stepped back to recover, Def moved in but another barrier appeared, blocking him. "I see," Def whispered as he observed the battle's rhythm. "A rotation." Rappa attacked in short bursts fueled by his quirk, but he had a time limit and needed pauses to recover. While he did, Tengai protected him with barriers, a perfect war of attrition strategy against someone like him. But unfortunately for them, Def thought, smiling faintly, they forgot about the cat. From the shadows behind Tengai, despair emerged. His eyes glowed deep violet as a psychic wave struck the villain, disrupting his concentration and shattering the barrier like glass. Def powered up. Shining Sun 25%. He propelled himself forward, punching Rappa square in the chest. Radiant punch. The impact was brutal. Rappa flew through the wall and fell unconscious. Def turned toward Despair and Tengai only to find the villain clutching his head in agony before collapsing. Def took a deep breath. "Good work, Despair. Let's find the others." The peculiar cat nodded, and the two made their way through the tunnels. Kitty Noir and Gravity were thrown into another underground chamber. Kitty flexed her claws with a snap, while Gravity took a defensive stance. Both froze when Rikiya Katsukame and Didoro Sakaki stepped out of a side corridor. Sakaki let out a twisted laugh and mumbled something unintelligible before activating his quirk. Dizziness hit Kitty like an invisible blow. The world spun, the ground wobbled, and she staggered. "Demon," she growled, closing her eyes. Guided by her feline instincts, she summoned her quirk, making large stones rise around her, trembling in the air. With a sharp motion she hurled them towards Sakaki. Stone cat attack, feline meteor. Unable to aim properly, Kitty fired several at once, but one struck Sakaki square in the face, shattering his mask and knocking him out. Meanwhile, Gravity faced Rikiya. He stomped toward her with heavy steps, trying to strike, but realizing he wouldn't land a hit, he reached for a trigger syringe. He never got the chance to use it. Gravity activated her quirk with a swift gesture. The villain, along with tables, chairs, and debris, began to levitate, whirling around her in an increasing vortex. Celestial vortex. Rikiya and the surrounding objects spun rapidly until Gravity released them, launching Rikiya violently into a wall. The impact left a wide crack and the villain unconscious. "That was quick," she murmured, eyeing the defeated foes. "Better this way," Kitty replied, still fighting off the dizziness but agreeing the fight had been short. Def and Despair moved through the underground corridors in search of the others. Upon finding a room resembling an improvised lab, they stopped to investigate. "This isn't just a trigger production site," Def said, examining the machinery. He found a computer and sifted through the files, his eyes widening with each line. "They're developing something bigger. And the girl is the key." Meanwhile, Vidian and Spectra followed a silent corridor until they reached the door to the girl's room. "Funny, usually I'm the one taking girls to the bedroom," Spectra teased with a playful smirk. Vidian flushed instantly. "It. Just kidding, silly. I'll stand guard. Go on." She nudged him, amused. Vidian took a deep breath and pushed the door open, trying to ignore the tingling sensation he'd been feeling all day. Inside the simple room, a little girl about 4 years old, with short white hair and a small asymmetrical horn curled up on the bed. Her wide eyes met his. "Hi, I'm Vidian. What's your name?" he asked, trying to sound as gentle as possible. The girl hesitated, trembling, before whispering. "Aries." Time break interlude. Brought to us by an overhaul frozen before something he could never hope to comprehend. He, a colossus 3 meters tall, shaped by his own unyielding will, emerged as the embodiment of the inevitable. His face remained hidden in shadow, save for the eyes, living embers, ancient, carrying the silent promise that no evil would prosper while he stood there. Behind him, a little girl recoiled out of habit, yet smiled. Not the smile of someone fleeing, but the smile of someone who, for the first time, was safe. Because the world could crumble, sins could march forward, and monsters could rise. But he had arrived. The chaos in the underground base raged on. Separated from one another, the Vigilante Guild members fought to regroup while trying to complete the mission. Dust and Flame were still trapped in the distorted corridor warped by Joy Irinaka's quirk. The metal pulsed like living flesh, twisting into unpredictable shapes, forcing them to dodge constantly to avoid being crushed. "Can't you use your quirk to get us out of here?" Flame asked, narrowly avoiding a column that sprouted from the floor. "Are you insane? If I use my quirk on the walls, I might accidentally kill the villain." Dust snapped back. "Besides, do you really want me disintegrating a tunnel we're currently inside? The whole thing could collapse on our heads." Flame sighed in reluctant agreement as he dodged another slab falling from the ceiling. Then two silhouettes appeared in the twisted corridor, the musician and the gambler. The musician pressed his hands to the vibrating wall. "I have an idea," he said in his monotone. Through resonance, he released a sound wave precisely calibrated to the corridor's frequency. It wasn't strong enough to destroy it, but it echoed strangely, bouncing until it struck Joy Irinaka, who screamed as he was forced out of hiding. The warped concrete parted, and he stumbled out. Before he could react, a playing card floated in front of him. The gambler appeared beside the others and snapped her fingers. The card exploded, slamming Joy into the wall and knocking him unconscious. The musician fell to his knees, exhausted. Flame ran to him. "Hey, you okay?" Sending sound waves at specific frequencies is harder than it looks. It's like trying to play an instrument in the middle of a war. He panted heavily. Even after Izuku helped him refine the technique, it still drained his energy. Before they could catch their breath, a gunshot rang through the corridor. The bullet hit the wall close to them. The gambler reached for another card, but it was snatched from her hand by an invisible force. Two figures emerged from the shadows, Shin Nemoto, holding a gun, and Toya Setsuno, gripping the stolen card. "You people don't understand? You're interfering with the world's cure," Shin declared, firing 3 times. Flame reacted instantly. A wave of blue fire melted the bullets midair. Then he launched himself forward, propelled by his own flames. Infernal punch. He struck Shin directly, knocking him out cold. Setsuno lifted his weapon, but Dust was already on him. With impressive speed, she grabbed the gun with all 5 bare fingers. It crumbled to dust right before his eyes. "You buy," he tried to shout, but Dust knocked him out with a single punch. "That was it," she muttered, disappointed by how easy the fight was. Nearby, the gambler tossed another card toward the lingering flames. It exploded into a cloud of extinguishing foam, putting out the fire. "Time to find the others," Dust said, brushing foam off her outfit. The 4 bound the villains and moved on. Def and Despair continued combing through Overhaul's laboratory. Def opened file after file while Despair silently observed. "They weren't just manufacturing Trigger," Def murmured, scrolling through another document. "They were developing a drag that erases quirks. Permanently." Despair's mental voice trembled. "If they use that on me, I'd turn into just a regular cat." "And there's more," Def continued. "The blood of that little girl is the key to the drag." Rage crept into his voice as he read her file. Aries, granddaughter of the former Yakuza boss, handed over to that monster by her own mother after a tragic accident. Her quirk, Rewind. The more Def read, the clearer the extent and the danger of her power became. Capable of undoing any injury, even fatal ones, by reverting a person's body to a previous state. Capable of reversing aging, but with incalculable risks. Def moved on to Overhaul's research notes. "If these reports are accurate, this girl has the world's first and likely only Class 6 healing quirk." He exhaled sharply. "And this Yakuza treats her like a lab rat." Despair stayed silent for a long moment before asking mentally, "What if the HPSC finds out about her?" "We can't let that happen," Def said firmly. He knew too well what the Commission was capable of. And Aries deserved much better. Which means leaving her with a pro-hero is no longer an option, he thought before activating his communicator. Innovation, this is Def erase all records on the quirk erasing bullets and the girl. Leave only the trigger trafficking data. Understood. Confirmation came. They also discovered that all sensitive data existed only on the lab's private server, which gave Def an idea. He inhaled deeply and focused. Bright sun, 10%, his hands glowed a blinding yellow. Dazzling ray. The blast obliterated everything in its path. Machines melted, circuits burst, and all lab material was vaporized. Def and Despair surveyed the scorched room for a moment before heading off to regroup with the others. Vidian and Spectra had reached the room where the girl was being held. Only Vidian entered. Spectra stood guard outside. He stepped in gently, careful not to frighten her further. The girl was huddled in the corner, trembling. Vidian crouched to meet her eyes. He saw fear, dread, and a faint spark of hope. Aries is a beautiful name, Vidian said softly. She recoiled even more. You need to go. Shisaki will hurt you. He makes people disappear, she whispered, terrified. I'm not afraid of him, Vidian answered firmly. My friends and I came to save you. He removed his hood, letting her see his face, and extended his hand. Do you want to leave with me? I promise. No one will hurt you again. She hesitated, then touched his hand. Vidian smiled, lifting her into his arms as he carried her out. Spectra smiled too when she saw them approaching the door. You're adorable and very brave. We'll get you out of here, Spectra said warmly as she raised her hand to open a portal. But the portal never formed. Overhaul and Chronostasis had stepped into the hallway silent, menacing. Return the key to healing the world, Overhaul demanded, voice cold as death. Spectra immediately stepped forward. Vidian, protect the girl, she ordered, summoning a translucent yellow energy that took the form of a winged serpent and lunged at the villains. Vidian pulled Aries close, ready to run, but then froze as he recognized Spectra's quirk. This quirk, it's identical to Starlight's, the leader of the QLF. He forced himself to push the thought away. Not now. Spectra did her best to hold both enemies back, but Overhaul advanced with brutal precision. She tried to redirect her construct, but a chronostasis shot grazed her shoulder, disrupting her energy for a moment. And it, she thought, fighting to regain control. Overhaul charged toward Vidian and Aries. If you don't return, these people will die, he said, nearing them. And it will be your fault, Aries. The girl trembled. Let me go, please. I don't want them to get hurt. Vidian inhaled deeply and placed her behind him. I won't ever let him hurt you again. Overhaul removed his gloves. One touch to the ground made massive sharp spikes erupt, racing toward them. Vidian closed his eyes. The tingling that had accompanied him all day surged through his entire body. I will protect her. He repeated it like a mantra, opened his eyes, drew his fist back and shouted, I will protect her. Smoke burst from his shoulders, arms, and legs, dense, hot, concentrated. Then, in his mind, he heard the sound of a gear turning. Gear 2. Vidian moved. In an instant, in impossible, superhuman speed, his fist met the incoming spikes with a devastating impact, reducing everything to dust. Vidian, no. Spectra screamed, horrified at what she thought was about to happen. The smoke cleared in a powerful gust of wind, revealing the shattered remains of the spikes and Vidian, standing tall, fist extended. But he was different. Taller. More muscular enough to tear parts of his uniform. His mask had disintegrated, fully revealing his calm yet determined expression. He looked back at Aries. It's going to be okay. I promise. I'll protect you. He smiled gently, placing himself firmly between her and Overhaul. Overhaul wasn't impressed by the intruder's sudden transformation. Without hesitation, he launched 3 more waves of spikes straight at him. Vidian watched the first barrage approaching and moved forward without a flicker of doubt. He walked straight into the incoming spikes, shattering them with a single punch while repeating in his mind that he would protect the girl no matter the cost. When the second wave came, something changed. The sound of gears turning echoed once again in his mind. Gear 3. Izuku felt more smoke burst from his body as sharp cracks rippled through his muscles. The spikes disintegrated the moment they touched his fist, as if they were made of fragile glass. The third wave met the same fate, obliterated with a single, overwhelming strike. The smoke surrounding him dispersed, revealing Izuku, now far larger than before. His body had grown again, expanding until his uniform tore apart completely, save for his underwear preserved by sheer luck. His muscles swelled proportionally to his new height, and his eyes gleamed with a determination so fierce it froze everyone around him. Spectra stared at the figure before her, unable to form words. Where once stood a lean, timid boy, now rose a titanic, 3-meter force of nature, all defined muscle and unshakable posture solid as a mountain. Izuku Midoriya, her little green, she knew he was Vidian now, but green was still much cuter, looked like he had transformed into a miniature All Might. She would never dare say that aloud, but the comparison was unavoidable. Was he a secret son All Might hid from the world to protect him from enemies? Unlikely. Not that it mattered now. What mattered was that her little broccoli had become a titan. She mentally reviewed what she knew, misdiagnosed as quirkless when, in truth, he possessed a dormant power. And now, right before her eyes, that power awakened at the critical moment as if destiny itself, read the plot, had waited for the perfect time to reveal it. Spectra blinked when she noticed the state of Izuku's costume. Even though it was designed to stretch, the material had failed against the dramatic expansion. Wow, it stretches, but not that much, she thought, eyes lingering on the new muscular build before she shook her head sharply and muttered to herself, "Fight now, thirst later." Taking advantage of Overhaul and Chronostasis's shock at Izuku's sudden mutation, Spectra raised her hand and summoned a luminous construct, a massive, translucent hand of solidified light. With perfect precision, she slammed Chronostasis into the wall like someone crushing an insect. The impact knocked him unconscious instantly. Spectra sprinted toward Vidian just as Overhaul recovered from his shock. "You're not leaving here with her. That cursed child is the key to curing this world of the plague called quirks," he roared, charging forward. Vidian locked eyes with the villain. "Protect her. Now." It wasn't a request, it was an order, and she knew it. Spectra scooped Aries into her arms, but her gaze drifted back to Vidian for a second too long. Are his muscles more defined now, or is that just my thirst talking? She wondered, watching more smoke drift from his body before she turned away and moved out of the battle line. Izuku stepped forward, eyes blazing with rage. Chisaki's words echoed in his head like an unforgivable insult. Emotions roared through him in a storm when the gears turned once more. Gear 4. He stared at the villain with pure, concentrated fury. "What did you call her?" he bellowed, lunging faster than someone his size had any right to move. Overhaul tried to react, but he had no time. Every spike he created was destroyed by a single punch. 1, 2, 3. They shattered like fragile glass under a hammer. Desperate, the villain tried to touch Izuku directly, but Vidian was faster. The punch he delivered hit Chisaki square in the face, shattering his mask and launching him through a wall. A few teeth flew before the villain collapsed, unconscious. The rest of the guild arrived just in time to see the final scene, a monstrous, 3-meter Izuku, muscles that would make many pro-heroes weep with envy, standing over Chisaki's defeated body while Spectra held Aries safely in her arms. Def froze at the sight. Vidian? Izuku turned toward them. Smoke poured from his body as he shrank back down to his normal size. Panting, he leaned against the wall, completely drained. Flame rushed to him, worried. "You okay? Besides my muscles feeling like they're on fire and wanting to sleep for a whole year?" "I'm great," Izuku replied with a tired grin. Gambler laughed. "When Def said late awakenings tend to result in powerful quirks, we expected something strong, but this is ridiculous." Everyone laughed nervously, but they laughed. Kitty draped a blanket over Izuku since his clothes had turned to dust. Def turned toward Spectra. "How's the girl?" Spectra approached with Aries in her arms. The moment she saw Izuku, the child leapt toward him, clinging to him like he was her lifeline. She cried softly, fear and relief tangled together. Exhausted as he was, Vidian held her gently. "You're safe now, Aries. We're here for you." Then he looked up at the group. "So, what happens to her now?" Dust answered immediately. "We're handing her over to the heroes." Aries' eyes widened. She clung to Izuku in desperation. No, don't leave me. I don't want to go, they'll get rid of me. Izuku tried to calm her while shooting dust a look so serious, almost threatening, that she curled in on herself instantly, already regretting what she said. Somehow he even seemed taller and stronger, just from how protective he looked. Def placed a hand on Dust's shoulder and stepped forward. Don't worry, Aries. Things are different now. If you want, you can come with us. Everyone except Despair stared at him in shock. Aries whimpered. Why would you want someone cursed like me? Izuku held her tighter. You're not cursed. Whoever told you that is an idiot. But Chisaki said, she began, but Izuku didn't let her finish. Who are you going to trust? Or me? He asked gently, not letting her sink back into fear. Aries hesitated, looked at the group, then whispered, Boo. Def nodded once. Then it settled. She comes with us. Before anyone could argue, Compress's voice echoed through the communicator. Heroes incoming. Prepare yourselves. Def sighed. Took them long enough. He looked at Spectra. Take us to the Denver. She nodded and opened a portal. As everyone crossed, Def approached Overhaul's unconscious body only to realize the villain was semi-conscious and starting to regenerate. You know, Def murmured, leaning down. I looked through your lab. What I found almost made me call Azrael here to execute you myself. But in my opinion, there are worse punishments than death. He pulled out a syringe filled with a red liquid. He plunged it into Overhaul. Enjoy becoming your own dream, Overhaul. Then he stepped through the portal. Back at the Vigilante's den, Spectra announced. I'll go get the levelers. She began opening another portal and vanished. Kana, who hadn't joined the assault, approached, her eyes landing on the child in Izuku's arms. Who is she? Kenji answered before anyone else could. This is Aries, and we're going to protect her. No matter what. Kana found it strange, but she trusted him, so she nodded. Moments later, Spectra returned with Crazy, Karma, and Twice. Crazy grinned. Compress and Gentle are leading the police away. It was fun. But it was awful, Twice said, immediately contradicting himself. Aries shrank into Izuku's arms at the sight of so many strangers. They're friends, Izuku whispered to her. They helped rescue you. The levelers exchanged confused looks, but Def cut them off before they could press further. I'll explain everything later. For now, baths for everyone and rest for Aries. They nodded, although still puzzled. Spectra then teleported the levelers back to their hideout, the House of Mysteries. Izuku approached Harumi. Harumi, could you help Aries take a bath? She nodded gently. Izuku whispered to Aries. Trust her, okay? She's our friend. Reluctantly, Aries let Harumi take her. She carried the little girl with care, while the others headed toward the showers ready to face whatever came next. Spectra returned to the hideout a few minutes after escorting the levelers back to their base. She stepped out of a golden light portal and let out a satisfied sigh, part relief, part exhaustion, already thinking about finally resting or catching up with her friends from the guild. She didn't even get the chance to breathe. Yoko grabbed her arm with enthusiasm. Come with me, little light. We have so much gossip to catch up on, she said with a mischievous grin. They entered Yoko's room, walls in shades of purple, LED strips everywhere, a Zatanna poster, glow-in-the-dark star stickers, a desk buried under scattered cards and illusionism books, a top hat hanging on a hook, a double bed stacked with pillows, and a nightstand with an open chemistry book. It was organized chaos basically. Yoko's personality turned into a room. Misaki collapsed onto the bed in the least elegant way possible, exhausted. Yoko settled into her armchair, crossing her legs. Alright, start from the beginning. How was the mission? And, were you flirting with Izuku again? I saw that look. Misaki laughed. You know me. Flirting is my natural charm. But tell me something, why does it feel like no one has ever flirted with him before? Even you always had that teasing vibe going on. Yoko raised an eyebrow, theatrically. I went through character development, darling. She struck an overly dramatic pose. I discovered I prefer girls. Misaki winked. Relax, sweetheart. I play for both teams, and sometimes the midfield too. Yoko snorted, swatting her friend's arm before her expression softened. But seriously, Izuku's a late bloomer. Grew up quirkless, and you know how our society treats the quirkless. He went through a lot. A lot. So it's pretty likely no one ever flirted with him genuinely. Misaki froze, imagining his life before joining them. A good thing you guys recruited him and not my mother. Just imagining someone with his mind and the power he showed today working under her, she practically spat the word mother as if it were poison. Yoko nodded slowly. Yeah, but then why do you look worried? Misaki sighed deeply. You really know me too well. She sat up straight, fingers interlaced. I'm pretty sure Izuku recognized my quirk. It's very specific, just like my mother's. Do you think he'll want to avoid me now? Yoko looked at her with empathy and firmness. From what I've seen, Izuku isn't the kind of person who judges someone by their quirk or their origins. But you need to talk to him. That's the only way to know. Misaki inhaled deeply and nodded. You're right. I'll talk to him now. She stood up and left. Yoko giggled maliciously. Too bad she has no idea where his room is. Then she headed toward the showers. Misaki didn't have to search long. Izuku was in the living room, sitting on the couch with Aries sleeping in his arms. The sight warmed her chest. They looked like father and daughter. Both had already bathed and changed clothes, and that's when she noticed the shirts. Aries was wearing an oversized shirt that said, socks. Izuku wore one that said, pants, in enormous letters. Misaki burst into laughter. You have an amazing sense of humor, Izuku. He turned red, flustered. You're the first person to say that. It's not that people don't think you're funny. Everyone here just has a much worse sense of humor, she said with a smile. Aries peeked at Misaki, shy, then gathered courage. Pretty lady, how do you do that? Misaki blinked. Do what, sweetie? Aries pointed to her mouth. The thing you did, with your mouth. Misaki felt her heart clench. Smile? Laugh. Aries nodded, eyes wide and vulnerable. I don't know how. The words hit Misaki like a punch. She had to breathe deeply not to let her rage boil over. If I kidnapped Overhaul and delivered him to Azrael as a gift, would that count as community service? She thought before holding the impulse down. That's not something you're taught, Aries, but don't worry. We'll show you how. She offered a gentle smile. Sensing the shift in mood, Izuku intervened kindly. How about we get you something to eat, Aries? The girl hesitated, until her stomach growled loudly. Misaki and Izuku laughed while Aries blushed faintly. Izuku carried her to the kitchen, sat her down, and opened the fridge. Nothing too heavy, Misaki said. Her stomach is probably still sensitive. Izuku nodded, found a container of soup, heated it up, and served it carefully. Aries began eating slowly, still timid. Misaki watched her fondly before turning back to Izuku. I imagine you have questions? Izuku nodded. He had plenty. Misaki inhaled, preparing herself. Well, as you already know, my name is Misaki Haruki. I'm 20 years old and I'm Starlight's daughter. Yes, the leader of the QLF. She paused to let Izuku absorb that. I ran away from home when I was 14, when I realized my mother never loved me. All she wanted was a successor for that rotten ideology. Another pause, heavier. And I inherited the same quirk as her. To demonstrate, she created a small construct of solid, perfectly shaped light floating above her palm, letting it dissolve afterward. Now that you know, you can hate me, she said quietly, looking away, bracing for disgust, fear, or distance. Misaki Haruki, Spectra. Quirk Solid Light. Class V allows the user to materialize light in the form of dense, fully tangible physical constructs such as platforms, weapons, shields, armor, walls, geometric structures, or more complex shapes. Furthermore, the quirk allows the creation of long-range warp portals capable of connecting 2 points in space through condensed light distortions. Izuku blinked slowly, then answered with calm clarity. Why would I hate you? Misaki's eyes widened. She expected that reaction from him, yet had absolutely no idea how to handle it. Because I'm the daughter of a terrorist, she murmured, almost like a confession. Izuku gave a sad little smile. And I'm the son of hero number 6, Emerald. Misaki's jaw dropped. Wait, what? And your dad? She asked, confusion and curiosity crashing together. Izuku hesitated. His gaze drifted, searching for memories he had long avoided revisiting. After a moment, he took a deep breath. I've always avoided that question. But I think it's time to stop running. He closed his eyes briefly. My father is all might. And before you ask, he's a terrible dad. What? Misaki shouted, loud enough to make Aries jump in her chair. Sorry, sweetie, she apologized before turning back to Izuku. Hero number 1 is married to hero number 6? Yes. They're married. And I also have a twin sister. She developed a powerful quirk and became the perfect daughter. I was thrown away. Misaki frowned instantly, fury flashing in her eyes. She opened her mouth to curse him out, then remembered Aries was nearby. She pressed her lips shut, breathing deeply. Izuku, silent, knew exactly what she wanted to shout. Before they could continue, Aries knocked over her cup of juice. The liquid spread across the table and dripped to the floor. The little girl froze. I'm sorry, she squeaked, panic warping her voice like she expected punishment. Misaki stepped forward to reassure her. Then Aries' horn began to grow and glow. Energy accumulated rapidly. Misaki didn't know the girl's quirk. Out of sheer caution, she activated a protective construct, solid light forming a second skin over her body. The energy washed over her, enveloping her for several seconds before finally fading. Aries collapsed unconscious in Misaki's arms. She only fainted. She's exhausted, Misaki confirmed with relief. But Izuku stared at her wide-eyed. Misaki blinked. Enjoying the view? She teased, raising a brow. Nothing. No reaction. Concern replaced the joke. Izuku? Is there something on my face? Still nothing. She grabbed her phone, opened the front camera and froze. Her face looked younger. Her skin, hair, facial structure, everything exactly like she had looked at 17. She inhaled sharply. What the hell, she whispered. A few minutes later, Misaki still couldn't believe what she was seeing. She stared at her screen in shock. By her estimate, she had de-aged 3 years 20 to she turned to Izuku, who had somehow pulled a notebook out of nowhere and was scribbling furiously, muttering theories at hyperspeed. Most of it was incomprehensible, except one phrase that stood out. Rejuvenation by physical contact. Misaki blinked, still processing both Izuku's words and the mystery of where that notebook kept appearing and disappearing from every time he set it down. Setting that mystery aside, she examined her body more carefully, and that's when she saw it. A thin mark on her arm. A small, shallow cut. Her blood ran cold. Izuku, she called, cutting through his stream of words. He stopped instantly, like someone had hit a pause button. What happened? She stepped closer and extended her arm. This cut. I remember it. It was from a training session 3 years ago. A blade grazed me when I lost focus. It healed no scar. But now, it's back. Izuku's eyes widened. Do you feel any memory loss from these last 3 years? Misaki frowned, thinking hard, then shook her head. No. I remember everything. Izuku summoned the notebook again. Misaki was sure it had vanished a minute ago and wrote even faster. Before she could ask where the hell he kept pulling that notebook from, Izuku murmured a conclusion. Selective temporal regression. She squinted. What now? Aries rewound your body to an earlier state, but didn't touch your memories, Izuku explained. You're lucky you activated your quirk to shield yourself. If you hadn't, she might have turned you into a child, or... He hesitated. Misaki felt a chill run down her spine. Or what? Izuku swallowed. Or erased your body completely. Rewound you to before you were born. Misaki's eyes went wide before shifting to the tiny girl asleep in her arms, fear blooming anew. She could have erased me from existence? She whispered. Yes, Izuku said seriously. And what's scarier, she can apparently choose what she rewinds. You mean, Like rewinding the mind but not the body? Misaki asked, horrified. Exactly. She could turn someone into a literal child with an adult body. He paused, breathing out slowly. If Aries' quirk functions like that, then she probably has the most powerful healing type quirk ever recorded. More than Recovery Girl. She could revert terminal illnesses, fatal injuries, maybe even undo degenerative mutations before they happen. Misaki dragged a hand down her face. A 4-year-old is giving me existential dread. Great. Izuku let out a small laugh, then asked, were you able to understand all that? Not all of it, but enough to know her quirk is terrifying and amazing at the same time. At that moment, a new voice came from the kitchen doorway. Izuku is right. Aries' quirk is, without a doubt, the most powerful healing ability ever recorded. They turned. Kenji stood there, arms crossed, expression serious, but his eyes kept flicking to Misaki, understandably concerned after what had happened. You knew what she was capable of? Misaki asked. I did. I plan to explain it to all of you today, Kenji replied. Her quirk is called Rewind. It can revert the physical state of any living being to a previous point in time. That makes her the first and probably only recorded Class 6 healing quirk. That's a Class 6 quirk? Izuku exclaimed. Misaki frowned. Class 6? I thought quirks only went up to Class V. Kenji walked toward them, adopting a didactic tone. As you know, quirk classification uses the model and scale, which divides quirks into 5 classes based on 3 criteria: output volume, activation restriction, and adaptability. He raised one finger. Class 1 quirks are actually not quirks at all. It's a vestigial designation that covers what we now call simple mutations, for example, being born with a pair of horns. A second finger. Class 2 quirks are those that don't fit neatly into any other category. Take a basic telekinesis quirk, for instance the ability to pull small objects into your hand. Small objects means the output volume is extremely low, and the weight you can manipulate is negligible. Since it only works toward your hand, adaptability is also very low. And the activation restrictions are severe, because you can only influence tiny, inanimate objects. It's a very limited condition. A third finger. Class 3 quirks must score reasonably well in at least one of the 3 criteria. A good example is Despair's telepathy. He can only affect rational minds, which makes the activation restrictions extremely strict. And he can only read thoughts and communicate mentally. That's low adaptability. But once he enters someone's mind, he can overload their synapses and knock them out, giving him a moderate output volume. A fourth finger. Class 4 quirks excel in 2 categories at once. Yoko's quirk, Royal Flush, is the perfect example. It has an incredible output volume and good adaptability. She can do many things with the cards besides throwing them. But she has a high dependence on nutrients and needs intense concentration to create them. Those factors make her activation restrictions significant. Finally, a fifth finger. Class V quirks excel in all categories. A good example is your quirk, Misaki Solid Light. It has high output, very few activation restrictions since it depends mostly on your focus, and because of the vast range of constructs you can create, it's extremely adaptable. Izuku nodded and then added, but there are forums online that suggest a 6th classification, Class 6. The best way to describe it is quirks that violate the logic of quirks, or even the logic of the world itself. He took a breath. These quirks allow someone to do things to other quirks, or directly interfere with fundamental laws of reality like space and time. Those same forums believe that Star and Stripe possesses a Class 6 quirk. Misaki rubbed her chin. That's terrifying. She paused. So, would All for One have one of those? Izuku's eyes widened. The quirk boogeyman is real? He yelped, horrified by how casually she brought it up. Kenji sighed. As real as we are. And Aries has one of those quirks. Overhaul was using her blood to create a drag that rewinds someone's quirk factor, erasing their quirk permanently. Izuku and Misaki froze. Misaki recovered first. So, that's why you couldn't hand her over to anyone. If my mother finds out, she shuddered, or the commission. Especially with Project Paragon, Kenji added. The hideout is the safest place for her. Izuku and Misaki nodded. Kenji looked at Eri for a long moment, his expression softening. Let her rest. I'll explain everything to the team, and talk to Takashi about your situation, Misaki. She blushed lightly. Thank you, Kenji. He gave a short nod and left, leaving the two alone with the sleeping girl and the weight of the dangerous miracle they now understood a little better. Vigilante Guild. Great son. Attention at everyone. I was planning to explain why I decided Aries should come with us, but the current situation made things more urgent. Burn. So you're finally gonna explain why you agreed to bring a 4-year-old kid to the hideout? That's not usually how we operate. G-Force? Yeah, because you're literally the last person I expected to do something like that. If it were at Burn, I'd understand. Burn. Hey, great son. Under normal circumstances, I'd never agree to bring a child here. But her situation is unique and far too delicate to ignore. Cat lady, what situation? Great. After a long and complicated explanation. Living rifle, the commission cannot find out this girl exists. Card queen, forget the obvious part. What the hell did that BV do to that sweet little girl? I'm going back there and shoving so many cards into that a-hole he'll look more like a dartboard than a villain. Burn. Can I go back too and burn him alive? The musician at Card Queen swearing is never a good sign, but weirdly I agree with her. Also, I just developed a new existential fear called Class 6 Quirks. G-Force, don't even get me started. But where's that Ninja Broccoli? Shouldn't he be hearing this? Great son, he's watching over Aries. Don't worry, I already told him everything after she had a small incident. Living rifle, what kind of incident? Great son, she got scared and accidentally activated her quirk. Misaki got hit. Card Queen, wait, what? Is she okay? Great son, ask her. Def C-ranked send invitation to the chat to Spectra unranked. Spectra unranked joins the chat with default nickname of Cool Girl. Cool Girl, hey guys. Card Queen, girl, are you okay? Cool Girl, yeah. I just went from 20 to 17 years old. No big deal. Card Queen, thank God. Wait, what? That understood. The musician, wait. At Cool Girl you were 20? Cool Girl, was /_. The musician. Doesn't that make your flirting with Izuku weird? Cool Girl, it was just flirting. Not like I was gonna do anything worse. Great son, you two, leave that for later. At Cool Girl, how's Aries? Cool Girl, sleeping peacefully. Great son, good. I'll present my report to the other counselors and talk to the good doctor to examine you 3. Cool Girl 3? Great son, you? To check what Aries' quirk did to you, Aries for a routine exam, and Izuku so we can analyze his quirk further. Cool Girl, makes sense. Great son is offline. Council of Shadows. Great son. Hello at everyone, sorry for the delay. I had to explain things to the guild first. I'm ready to present my report on the attack against the Shai Hasaikai. Clown King. Good, because my associates said you took the little girl with you, and I'd like to know how true that is. Old of the Fist, you brought a child? Great son, yes. 2 reasons. First, she grew attached to Izuku to the point of almost having a panic attack just thinking about being left with the heroes. Mommy Bird, why did she attach to him? Great son, because Izuku defeated the villain who kept her as a test subject with a single punch. I'm honestly surprised Overhaul survived. To her, he must look like an invincible god. Mommy Bird. Steampunk. Nice guy. Wait, how did Izuku defeat Overhaul with 1 punch? How? Great son. Apparently our new recruit chose that exact moment to awaken a powerful full-body enhancement quirk, with some kind of transformation component. At the very least, it's Class V. He used it to throw a single punch roughly 50 to 60% of my own power. It was strong enough to blast Overhaul straight through a wall and knock several teeth out. Honestly, I'm surprised his head didn't come off. Great son. I believe he activated his quirk to heal himself while the punch was landing. That's probably the only reason he survived what should have been a fatal blow. Great son, which means we should thank you again, at Nice Guy. Izuku could easily become an SS rank combatant, maybe even SSS, depending on how his quirk develops and how much further we refine that analytical mind of his. General silence. Nice guy. Well, I think we're all lucky I found him first and not the Kulif. Steampunk. Radical bird. Happy face. Best shinobi. Happy face carrot. Old of the fist. Got it. What's the second reason? Great. After another very long explanation. Mommy bird, what the hell is that? Nice guy, carrot. Gentle criminal, happy face. The paladin, my dear compatriot, where may I find this individual? We shall merely talk with my sword. Best shinobi, I'll help with that conversation. Great son, tempting, honestly. But I don't think that'll be necessary. I already gave him a taste of his own medicine. I injected him with the only dose of the permanent quirk erasure drag he had, before he could fully heal himself. And judging by the damage Izuku caused, I doubt he'll ever walk again. That is, assuming he doesn't end up with permanent brain damage. The paladin, a punishment more than worthy of a defender of the righteous. Old of the fist, back to the main issue. Even though I agree with the paladin, the commission can't even dream that this girl exists. Clownking, hurt. Mommy bird, happy face. Steampunk, happy face carrot. Great son, agreed. The hideout is the safest place for her. The paladin, and my compatriot touched by the child's light? Great son, she's actually fine. But I'm taking her to the doctor just to be safe. Great son, anyone else before we end the meeting? Mommy bird, Toga wants to thank Izuku personally. Great son, we can arrange that. Mommy bird. Also, a girl contacted us through the network. Her father is abusive and a hero. She's waiting for a chance to run away. Great son, if you need help, let us know. And if no one else is going to add anything, I'll end this meeting. Great son is offline. The following morning, Aries was once again in the cold corridors of the Shai Hasaikai complex, listening to Overhaul's voice echoing in the darkness. You're a cursed child. Nobody will want you, his voice whispered. She then woke up gasping, tears already welling in her eyes. Startled, she quickly looked around, trying to recognize where she was. The room was different. Soft colors, a bed with clean sheets, no windows, and a door. The memory of the previous night slowly came back to her. Her being rescued from Overhaul. The beautiful woman. The gentle boy. The warm laughter. The warmth of a hug. But then she remembered. Her curse. She had activated it unintentionally. She made the beautiful woman disappear just like her father. And now perhaps they had decided to get rid of her. The door opened and Izuku entered, a gentle smile on his face. Good morning, Aries, he said softly. But upon seeing him, panic erupted. She cowered in the corner of the bed, covering her eyes with her arms. I'm sorry. I made the nice girl disappear. I didn't mean to, I'm sorry. Izuku walked quickly to her and hugged her carefully. Hey, come to Aries, it's okay. Nobody disappeared, I promise. It was an accident, and you didn't hurt anyone. Aries, through tears, murmured that she was cursed. Izuku stepped back a little to look at her. Your quirk isn't a curse. It's a gift. An incredible power. You just need time to learn how to control it. But Chisaki said that, she began, but Izuku interrupted her. Who are you going to believe, Aries? Chisaki, or me? She fell silent, breathing heavily. Why who? She finally whispered. Before Izuku could answer, a voice came from the doorway. Good morning, unicorn. Aries turned slowly. Misaki, the pretty girl, was standing there, smiling. She was different? Smaller, perhaps. Younger. But it was still her. She was there. She hadn't disappeared. Aries ran to her and hugged her tightly. You didn't disappear, you're here? Of course I am. I promised I'd take care of you, remember? Misaki said, stroking the girl's hair. Izuku watched the scene with a smile. Shall we have breakfast? He asked. Aries nodded. On the way to the kitchen, Aries looked at Izuku, gathering courage to ask her savior a question. What's your name? Izuku seemed surprised. Oh, that's right. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I'm Misaki Haruki, the woman said with a smile. I am Aries, the girl replied innocently, which made the two security guards laugh. The trio arrived in the kitchen, where everyone was already gathered. Kenji, Hana, Yoshi, Toya, Aoi, Harumi, Kana, Yoko. And the cat, Despero. Aries became shy and hid behind Izuku's leg. He crouched down. They're my friends, Aries. Everyone here wants to protect you. She nodded. Slowly. That's Hana, and that's Kenji. This is Harumi, and the cat over there is Despair. That's Yoko, over there is Toya and Aoi. This is Yoshi. Everyone from the Guardians Guild, Izuku said as he introduced Aries to everyone. With time and care, Aries began to feel more comfortable with the chaotic family that was the guild. She looked curiously when Harumi made some funny noises with her tail. She shyly played with Despero who, strangely, accepted the affection. Until she noticed Kenji at the sink fiddling with something red and shiny. What's that? She asked softly. Kenji looked at her affectionately. That's an apple. Want to try one? Kenji asked, offering one to Aries. She nodded as she took it. And when she took the first bite, her eyes widened. It was sweet. It was juicy. To us. Wonderful. Kenji chuckled. Looks like we have an apple fan. A few hours later, Kenji, Izuku, Misaki, and Aries went to the medical wing. Aries was nervous, but Izuku reassured her with gentle words. The good doctor greeted them in his normal clothes and with a strangely gentle smile. He said he would examine the three of them. Misaki went first. And after a battery of tests, it was found that she had indeed rejuvenated 3 years, but thankfully she was healthy. Aries would be next, but she was still nervous, so Izuku went ahead to calm her down. Interesting, murmured the doctor, looking at the data. What is it? Asked Kenji. Well, I'm not an expert on quirks, but based on this data and the information you gave me, I can say that Izuku's quirk seems to be a Class V transformation quirk, which enhances all of his physical attributes, said the doctor. Class V, are you sure? Asked Izuku. Yes. Most Class 4 enhancement quirks are only capable of enhancing one physical characteristic, like Thunderbolt Speed Quirk, replied the doctor, practically spitting out the name of the number 3 hero. Did you happen to be able to activate your quirk again? Questioned the doctor. Izuku shook his head negatively. I tried. But for some reason I can't. It's like... Izuku paused, trying to find the right word. Like something is missing. The doctor nods. I think I can figure out what it is, he says, pulling out some data. I noticed abnormal mental activity in the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex. I've seen this sort of thing before in quirks powered by emotions, said the doctor. Hearing the doctor's words, Izuku pulled out his notebook. No one knew where he got it from and began to scribble and mutter in a storm of rapid grumbles. Physical enhancement based on mental states? Emotional stimulus. Adrenergic response. Maybe a state of anger? No, not just that. Maybe activated with focus? Hard to say. I need more data, more variables, hormonal dependence? Neurotransmitters? Dopamine? No, serotonin? Maybe. I need to test with controlled scenarios. Where are my graphs? Kenji stared at him in surprise. It seems the activation depends on a specific mental state, he summarized, surprising everyone, including Izuku, but Kenji didn't seem to notice the surprise on their faces because he was too busy thinking about how annoying it would be to train this quirk. Izuku snapped out of his stupor and continued, if that's true, it means that the more intense the emotion, the more strength I gain, and consequently, the more intense the transformation should become. Wait, Misaki interrupted. During your fight against Overhaul, the moment he handed Aries over to me, I noticed his muscles became more defined, Misaki commented, blushing slightly. And why didn't you mention that before? The doctor asked. This only made Misaki look down, clearly embarrassed. Of course, teenagers, he murmured. Kenji laughed. But it makes sense. After handing Aries over, Izuku's emotional state increased, which activated a kind of second stage of his transformation. Izuku continued while doodling. He and his friends discussed more theories about his quirk, but he still wasn't sure what mental state was necessary to activate it. that would have to wait. Finally, Aries was examined. She was less scared, and Izuku stayed with her the whole time. Furthermore, the exams didn't include blood tests. The results were basically what they expected. She was underweight and had scars on her arms that wouldn't disappear, but she was stable. The group left the medical wing after finishing the exams. Misaki picked up her phone and checked the time. "I need to go back to the hunter's hideout," she said resignedly, while Kenji nodded. Both Izuku and Aries showed sadness at her departure until, in a quick movement, she turned to the green-haired boy and pulled him into a hug. "See you next time, little green one." "It was a pleasure meeting you," she said as Izuku's face turned red and he tried to murmur a goodbye. "Actually, I think you deserve a small reward for saving me from the evil Birdman," she said with a smile before giving him a kiss on the cheek, which made his face even redder and you could swear smoke was coming out of his ears while a pretty girl kissed him. Izuku.exe stopped working, awaiting reboot. Misaki separated from Izuku, still stunned, and said goodbye to Kenji and Aries, before creating a warp portal to the hunter's base, not before turning to Izuku one last time, but, "Call me, okay?" she said, winking at Izuku before disappearing through the portal. Izuku didn't even have time to register Misaki's departure as he waited for his brain to reboot to the sound of Kenji's laughter and Aries' confused look. But before they had a chance to move away the medical ward, the doctor ended up calling them back. "I was updating the data and," he said, pointing to the computer, "that and maybe I pressed the wrong button." Kenji then approached to see what his doctor had done. The first thing he noticed was that his doctor had pressed the button to perform a genetic test on one of Izuku's DNA samples, something Kenji had forgotten this computer could do. But before he could interrupt the test, the message "compatibility found" appeared on the screen, and curious, he decided to see the result. On the screen, an image of Izuku next to Hana's appeared. And below, genetic compatibility found 13%. "That corresponds to first cousins, if I'm not mistaken," explained the doctor, while the security guard and the doctor turned to face Izuku, who had just restarted and was now staring at the screen in shock. "Shimura," Izuku murmured. "It's my Emerald's maiden name," the green-haired boy added, already knowing this since day one. But he hadn't thought much about it since there are hundreds of people with identical surnames but no relation, and besides, his donor never mentioned having siblings before. Then something clicked in his mind. Emerald had been in the foster care system. Her grandmother had placed her there for her safety after a villain killed her grandfather. Logically, she could have done the same with any other child and never told any of them about the other's existence. And now that he thinks about it, she looks like a younger version of her grandmother, from the few photos he'd seen of her, especially in her vigilante costume, something he'd dismissed as a huge coincidence. Her grandmother is the same as mine. Nana Shimura. Izuku murmured unconsciously, processing this new information. Kenji's eyes widened at this. He'd known Hana for years. This is going to be strange. He simply says this because he already has an idea of what's coming.